Hi everyone, welcome to Regular Rampage. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to argue that Mordecai ended up with the right person, because the show proved he needed to transform himself completely before he deserved anyone at all. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. Section 1. The uncomfortable truth we need to establish before we can talk about who Mordecai should have ended up with. We need to address something uncomfortable. Mordecai was genuinely a bad boyfriend. The kind of bad that goes beyond cute, relatable awkwardness. The kind that hurt people and made everyone around him miserable. In a Reddit AMA, the show's head writer Matt Price said it plainly. He was too wishy-washy with them. That's the diplomatic version. The honest version? Mordecai emotionally cheated, publicly humiliated his girlfriend at a wedding, and kept making the same mistakes over and over. Even the YouTube creator who tried to defend him admitted, "I went in this video thinking I would prove something, but yeah, he does kind of suck at certain points." Let's start with the worst moment. In the episode Dumped at the Altar, Muscle Man's getting married to Starla. It's their big day. Mordecai reads a letter from Muscle Dad about trusting your gut and finding the right person. It's touching. It's beautiful. And then Mordecai does something so unbelievably selfish that even Muscle Man calls him out. He hijacks the entire wedding to give a speech about his own relationship problems. Finding the right person is hard, he says. So where's my soulmate? Are they in this room? It could be anyone. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's that really old lady. I don't know. He's pointing at random people in the crowd, turning his best friend's wedding into therapy for himself. CJ is sitting right there, watching her boyfriend have a breakdown about whether she's his soulmate. And the worst part? He never points at her. Not once. When she asks, "You don't know who your soulmate is?" he has no answer. He's about to dump her publicly at someone else's wedding. Think about what that means for a second. This is Muscle Man's wedding. The guy who's been planning this with Starla, who's been excited about it, who specifically asked Mordecai to read his dead father's letter because he trusted him. And Mordecai takes that trust, that emotional vulnerability, and uses it as a springboard to talk about himself. The letter was supposed to be advice for Muscle Man. Mordecai turned it into a confession booth for his own confusion. CJ hands him back the charm bracelet, the one that melted into a heart when he saved her, the symbol of their whole relationship, and runs out crying. Muscle Man says, "Yo, Mordo, if you're finished hijacking my wedding, is it okay if we get married now?" Even the person defending Mordecai admitted, "That wedding, man, that was bad." The wedding speech was the culmination of a pattern. To understand how Mordecai got there, we need to go back to the episode Merry Christmas Mordecai, where everything started falling apart. Eileen throws a Christmas party. Both CJ and Margaret will be there. Margaret's back from college. Mordecai spends the whole episode panicking, convinced that acting weird around Margaret will make CJ think he still has feelings for her. He literally fakes a phone call and runs away when he sees Margaret at the post office. When Rigby tries to tell him he's overreacting, Mordecai just doubles down on the anxiety. At the party, CJ asks him directly, "Do you still have feelings for Margaret?" He says, "No, I don't feel that way about her anymore. I'm with you. That's all I care about." CJ believes him. She kisses him. For a moment, it seems like Mordecai finally learned to communicate. Then Margaret pulls him aside. They have a mature conversation. She's happy for him, didn't expect him to wait for her. They acknowledge things didn't work out, but they had good times. It should be perfect closure. They're being adults about a complicated situation. They're doing everything right. And then they kiss. Just straight up kiss. While Mordecai is dating CJ. At a Christmas party where CJ is in the other room. The show tries to blame a magical mistletoe disco ball that triggers a memory montage. We see flashbacks from the episode Stake Me Amadeus, riding bikes, eating pizza, visiting an aquarium. We see their kiss from the episode Meteor Moves. The emotional weight overwhelms them. The show uses its magical realism to create plausible deniability. But even if we accept magical disco ball logic, Mordecai's response afterward is terrible. CJ walks in, sees them kissing. The moment stretches out. You can see her face change as she processes what she's seeing. She turns gray, the first sign of her storm cloud power activating. She runs out crying. Mordecai chases her, but his first words are, "I didn't mean to do it," making excuses before he even catches up to her. He's already in defense mode, already thinking about how to explain himself, already prioritizing his own feelings over hers. The next episode, Sad Sacks, makes it worse. A week later, Mordecai meets CJ at the coffee shop to apologize. He says the kiss meant nothing, that it was just a mistake brought on by nostalgia and weird magic. CJ is about to forgive him. You can see her softening, see her wanting to believe him, see her trying to give him another chance. And then Margaret calls. Here's the damning part. Margaret's contact photo is a romantic picture of them together. Her ringtone is a custom song he sang about her. CJ sees this and storms out yelling, "Nice custom ringtone, you jerk." Think about what this means. Mordecai dated CJ for months. They went to parties together, met each other's parents. In the episode Maxin' and Relaxin', CJ met Mordecai's mom and dad and watched embarrassing home videos with them. In the episode Daddy Issues, Mordecai supported CJ through a difficult confrontation with her father. They exchanged gifts. They built a real relationship with genuine emotional emotional intimacy, and the entire time, every single time Margaret called or texted, Mordecai saw that romantic photo and heard that personalized song. That takes active effort to maintain. He had to choose that photo. He had to set up that ringtone. And then he had to choose to keep them, day after day, while telling CJ he was over Margaret. That's keeping a shrine to your ex while pretending to commit to someone new. Then there's the episode 1000th Chopper Flight Party. CJ can't come to Margaret's dad's party. She's volunteering at a river cleanup. She tells Mordecai to go, says she trusts him. This is CJ being mature, trying to show that she's moved past the Christmas kiss incident, trying to prove she won't let jealousy control their relationship. She's doing everything right. And Mordecai? He gets in a helicopter with Margaret and her parents, leaving his girlfriend on the ground. CJ shows up early. Someone got chemical burns and they sent everyone home. First thing she sees is Mordecai and Margaret in the helicopter, laughing together, having what looks like an amazing time. Then the helicopter jerks and Mordecai falls onto Margaret's lap. It looks bad. From the ground, from CJ's perspective, it looks like her boyfriend is up there having a romantic helicopter ride with his ex-girlfriend while she was out doing volunteer work. CJ goes full storm cloud and nearly kills Margaret's parents by shaking them out of the helicopter with lightning and wind. Now, defenders say a lot of this was accidental. The helicopter jerked. Physics happened. The Christmas kiss was magical disco ball nonsense. Margaret's dad offered the helicopter ride, and refusing would be rude. Sure, some of that's true, but here's the thing. The accidents kept happening because Mordecai put himself in positions where accidents could happen. He never set boundaries with Margaret, never changed her contact info, never told CJ that Margaret was now Eileen's roommate and would be around all the time. He kept all his options open instead of committing to one person. Every time he had a choice between protecting his relationship with CJ and maintaining his connection to Margaret, he chose Margaret. This is what too wishy-washy means. Mordecai wasn't cruel or malicious. He didn't wake up each day planning to hurt people. But his inability to choose, his constant hedging, his refusal to let go of Margaret while dating CJ, that hurt people just as much as cruelty would have. Maybe more, because at least cruelty is honest about what it is. The pattern is clear. Mordecai took steps forward with CJ, but could never close the door on Margaret. You can't build a future when you're living in the past. You can't ask for trust when you're keeping a shrine to your ex in your phone. You can't claim commitment when you keep compromising it with small choices that add up. So before we ask if Mordecai ended up with the right person, we need to acknowledge that for most of the series, Mordecai wasn't the right person for anyone. He was too broken, too confused, too unwilling to actually choose. CJ deserved better. Margaret deserved better. They both deserved someone who would choose them fully and completely. This is the uncomfortable truth. Mordecai's love life fell apart because he made it fall apart through his choices, or through his refusal to make choices. The universe didn't conspire against him. Bad luck didn't ruin everything. He sabotaged himself over and over because he was too scared to commit. Until we acknowledge that, we can't honestly talk about what ending he deserved. Now that we've established Mordecai's failures, let's look at whether his first love interest could have ever fixed him. Section 2. Margaret was never real. The fantasy girlfriend trap. Margaret was introduced in the episode Caffeinated Concert Tickets, and from the very first moment she was less a character and more a concept. The pretty waitress at the coffee shop. The girl Mordecai couldn't talk to without sweating. The validation he desperately needed but could never quite reach. Here's the entire scene where Mordecai decides Margaret is worth pursuing. He and Rigby are watching TV at the coffee shop, arguing about whether to go to a fist pump concert. Mordecai thinks the band is lame. Rigby desperately wants to go. Then Margaret walks up and asks if they're talking about the concert. When she mentions she's going, Mordecai immediately changes his tune. "I'm totally gonna go," he says. Rigby calls him out. "I can't believe you're going to a fist pump concert just for some lady pecs." And Mordecai punches him to shut him up. That's it. That's the foundation of their entire relationship. Margaret likes something, so Mordecai pretends to like it too. She exists, so he wants her. There's no conversation about shared interests, no moment of genuine connection, no reason for Mordecai to be interested in her beyond the fact that she's a girl who works at a coffee shop he visits. And for the first 2 seasons of regular show, that's basically all Margaret is. For the first 2 seasons of the show, hardly any of Margaret's personality is showcased. She's shown as a blank slate who serves no other purpose other than being a love interest. Even fans who went back and analyzed the early seasons noted the chemistry between them was dull as ever. Margaret was a trophy, a goal, a finish line Mordecai was running toward.
She was never a person.
This matters because it reveals what Mordecai was actually chasing. He was chasing the idea of having a girlfriend, the validation of being chosen, the proof that he was worthy of love. Margaret could have been anyone. She just happened to be the girl who was there, who was kind to him, who smiled at his jokes when she took his coffee order. In the episode Do or Diaper, we see this pattern play out in its most embarrassing form. Muscle Man bets Mordecai that he can't kiss Margaret by midnight Friday. If Mordecai succeeds, Muscle Man wears a diaper for a week. If Mordecai fails, he wears the diaper. The entire episode is Mordecai preparing for a date like it's a military operation. Working out, buying mints, practicing kissing techniques from a magazine, getting a haircut, trying on expensive suits. He takes Margaret to see a romantic movie called Oopsie Daisy, but she wants to see Bucktooth Bob Goes to Europe instead. Mordecai reluctantly agrees, sitting through the entire comedy while everyone else laughs. He holds her hand. He takes her to the park's lake. He chews so much gum and takes so many mints that his breath literally creates a winter wasteland that freezes everything around him. And when Margaret finds out about the bet, she's furious. Here I thought we were having a great time on a fun date, and it was all for a dumb bet? Mordecai's response is telling. I really just wanted this kiss to happen, and I lost sight of being a good friend. He wanted the kiss. He wanted the achievement. He wanted to win the bet and prove something to himself and his friends. Margaret as a person, her feelings, her agency, her actual desires, came second to Mordecai's need for validation. And here's the thing that makes this even sadder. Margaret was having a great time. She tells him at the end that she enjoyed the date. She almost kisses him at 11:59, right before midnight, then dodges at the last second and whispers, "Have a nice week, diaper boy." It's brutal, but it's also fair. She's punishing him for treating her like a prize instead of a person. Margaret was the classic, he has a crush and is too shy to do anything and always messes up in front of her archetype that totally works in the first few seasons. And yeah, it does work as comedy. Watching Mordecai fumble and sweat and panic around Margaret is funny. But as the show went on, as the seasons piled up, this dynamic started feeling less cute and more concerning. Because Mordecai was building an entire fantasy around someone he barely knew. He'd watch her pour coffee and imagine a whole future together. He'd see her smile and interpret it as a sign. He'd spend hours working overtime to afford concert tickets just because she mentioned she was going. He was doing the classic nice guy routine, performing acts of service and devotion, because he thought those performances would eventually earn him the relationship he wanted. The show even gives us a perfect example of what Mordecai's actual feelings look like. In the episode Caffeinated Concert Tickets, when Margaret mentions the concert, Mordecai drools as he sees her wearing a fist-pump tank top with no sides. The camera lingers on his stunned, slack-jawed expression. This is what he's attracted to: the image, the appearance, the fantasy. He tells Rigby, "One day you'll be old enough to understand the real reason that people go to concerts," implying that the real reason is to impress girls. Multiple YouTube commentators and fans have pointed out this dynamic. One noted that the relationship felt more like an idealistic fantasy than genuine connection. Another called it a dream girl fantasy rather than actual compatibility. The relationship was built on projection, on Mordecai imagining Margaret as whatever he needed her to be, rather than discovering who she actually was. And the tragic thing is that Margaret probably would have been interested in Mordecai if he'd just talked to her like a normal person. We see glimpses of this later when they actually become friends. They have fun together when Mordecai stops performing and just exists around her. But in these early seasons, he's so busy trying to be perfect, so focused on not messing up, so desperate to make the moment happen, that he never just talks to her. This is textbook idealization. Psychologists call it pedestaling, putting someone on a pedestal so high that they stop being a real person and become an idea instead. And the problem with pedestals is that the person on top of them can never live up to the fantasy you've created. They're always going to disappoint you because they're human and complex and messy, and your fantasy version of them is perfect and simple and exactly what you need. Mordecai spent years building up this image of Margaret in his head, the perfect girl, the one who would make everything make sense, the relationship that would fix whatever was broken inside him. And because he spent so long on the fantasy, he never did the work of actually getting to know the real Margaret, her hopes, her fears, her actual personality beyond nice waitress who likes fist pump. Margaret is shown as having minimal personality, development in early seasons. She's characterized as existing primarily from Mordecai's perspective. One analysis straight up calls her a blank slate in the first 2 seasons. And that's damning, because it means the show knew what it was doing. It was deliberately keeping Margaret underdeveloped because she was serving a specific narrative function. She was the object of desire, the goal, the thing Mordecai was chasing. This also explains why, when the show finally tried to develop Margaret as a character in later seasons, the relationship fell apart. Because once Margaret became a real person with her own goals and desires and agency, she stopped fitting into Mordecai's fantasy. And Mordecai, who had spent years invested in the fantasy version, struggled to adapt to the reality. You can see this clearly in the episode Do or Diaper. Mordecai plans this elaborate romantic date with a romantic movie and a moonlit lake. But Margaret wants to see the comedy. She wants to laugh and have fun, while Mordecai wants romance and kissing. Their desires are completely misaligned because Mordecai never actually asked Margaret what she wanted. He just assumed she wanted what he wanted, or rather, what he thought she should want. And when Margaret finds out about the bet, her anger is justified. "You always do this," she tells him. "Every time it seems like we're getting close, you throw me for a loop." She's recognized the pattern. Every time Mordecai gets close to treating her like a real person, he does something to remind her that he's more interested in the idea of dating her than in actually knowing her. Fan observations back this up. Multiple Reddit threads about the Margaret era describe the chemistry as dull. People remember feeling frustrated watching Mordecai fumble around her for seasons. The relationship took seasons to develop, and even when it did develop, it never felt quite right because the foundation was fantasy, projection, idealization. This is why Margaret could never have worked long-term. The relationship was doomed from the start because it was built on Mordecai's need for validation rather than genuine compatibility. He wanted a girlfriend. He wanted to feel chosen. He wanted to prove to himself and his friends that he was worthy of love. And he picked Margaret to fill that role because she was there and she was pretty and she was nice to him. The tragedy is that Margaret deserved better. She deserved someone who was interested in her as a person, not as a trophy. She deserved someone who would ask what movie she wanted to see instead of assuming she wanted romance. She deserved someone who would talk to her honestly instead of performing elaborate rituals designed to impress her. And Mordecai deserved better too. He deserved to learn how to connect with people authentically instead of treating relationships like achievements to unlock. He deserved to understand that love is about mutual respect and genuine interest and shared experiences, about actually knowing someone and being known by them in return. The Margaret era of regular show is a perfect example of what happens when you chase a fantasy instead of pursuing reality. You waste years of your life running towards something that was never real in the first place. You hurt people who didn't deserve to be hurt. And you miss out on actual connection because you're too busy performing to be authentic. Margaret was never real. At least, the Margaret that Mordecai was chasing was never real. She was a projection, a fantasy, a role he needed someone to fill. And you can't build a relationship on that. You can barely build anything on that except disappointment and wasted time. But regular show did something unexpected. It actually tried to develop this relationship into something real, which is where things got complicated. Before we dive in, a quick ask. Subscribe if you haven't yet. It's free and it really helps us keep creating content for this amazing community. All right, let's get started. Section 3. When fantasy meets reality, the brief Margaret romance. Here's where things get interesting. Regular show did something most cartoons refused to do. It actually let Mordecai and Margaret start dating. Seasons 3 and 4 gave them real moments together. They went on actual dates. They had genuine conversations. The show tried to turn the fantasy into reality. And the relationship immediately started cracking under the weight of that reality. One of their first real moments happens during a camping trip to an abandoned zoo. This is one of the moments that gave me the warm fuzzies. They're exploring together, talking, being actual people around each other. For once, Margaret feels like a real person, and Mordecai seems relaxed. But even these good moments reveal a problem. Mordecai still can't just be himself. He's still performing, still trying to be perfect, still terrified of messing up. In the episode Bad Kiss, Mordecai and Margaret kiss for the first time. They're in her car, looking for his wallet, and they lean in close. They kiss. And Margaret immediately pulls away. "Your breath is really bad," she says. Mordecai is humiliated. He runs away, apologizing over and over. "That was our first kiss and I blew it. I'm never going to be able to face her again. I wish I could just take it back." Rigby reveals he still has the time machine they bought for $15. So Mordecai spends the entire episode using time travel to try and undo the kiss. He goes back and tries to give himself mints, His past self won't take them. He tries to stop himself from eating the chili dog that gave him bad breath. The truck crashes and his past self eats the chili dog off the ground anyway. He goes back to that morning and tries to force mouthwash down his own throat. Nothing works. Eventually, after chasing himself through time, Mordecai finally prevents the kiss. Margaret leans in, and Mordecai chickens out, pretending to find his wallet. Margaret looks disappointed. Mordecai saved himself from embarrassment by giving up the kiss entirely. This reveals something important. Mordecai would rather avoid risk entirely than deal with imperfection. He'd rather have no kiss than a bad kiss. He'd rather run away and fix things through time travel than just apologize to Margaret and laugh about it together. Margaret was ready to move past it, but Mordecai couldn't handle being imperfect in front of her. Then there's the episode Do or Diaper, where Muscle Man bets Mordecai that he can't kiss Margaret by midnight Friday. If Mordecai succeeds, Muscle Man wears a diaper for a week. If he fails, Mordecai wears the diaper. It's dumb, and Mordecai takes the bet anyway. He spends the entire week preparing, working out, buying mints, getting a haircut, practicing kissing from a magazine. He takes Margaret on a fancy date, planning everything. He wants to see a romantic movie. Margaret wants to see a comedy. Mordecai reluctantly agrees. During the movie, everyone laughs except Mordecai. He's too focused on the plan. And when they're by the lake afterward, Margaret is having a great time. But then she finds out about the bet. Here I thought we were having a great time on a fun date, and it was all for a dumb bet? She's furious. Margaret almost kisses him anyway at 11:59, right before midnight, then dodges at the last second and whispers, "Have a nice week, diaper boy." She punishes him for treating her like a prize. The episode ends with Mordecai wearing the diaper, but he's smiling. Why? Because Margaret was actually having a great time on the date, and that means she must like me, which means that I still have a chance to kiss her one day. He learned nothing. He's still thinking about future chances, future perfect moments. He's still living in the fantasy. But the show keeps trying to make it real. In the episode Family Barbecue, Margaret invites Mordecai to meet her family. Her dad, Frank, pilots Chopper 6, the traffic helicopter. He's super protective and refuses to shake hands with any guy Margaret brings home. Mordecai spends the entire episode trying to get that handshake. He flips burgers perfectly. He catches a rugby ball and a wooden leg. He performs the Heimlich maneuver. Nothing works. Eventually, Mordecai challenges Frank to a cannonball contest. They jump from higher and higher platforms until Frank calls for Chopper 6 and announces it's Mannonball time. They fly up in the helicopter. Frank tells Mordecai to give up, and Mordecai finally says what he's been holding back. "I only did this contest because I wanted you to like me." Frank breaks down. "It's about losing my baby girl. Every time she brings one of you yahoos to the house, I'm afraid you're going to take her away from me." Mordecai responds, "Margaret thinks you're the greatest dad ever. No matter what happens, you're always going to be her dad. She loves you, man." The helicopter loses stability. Frank falls out. Mordecai grabs a parachute and jumps after him. The parachute rips. They're both going to die. As they're falling, Frank raises his hand for a handshake. "It was nice knowing you, Mordecai." Mordecai takes his hand. They land in the pool, and the handshake breaks their fall, saving both their lives. This episode shows Mordecai at his best. When he stops performing and speaks honestly, things work out. The problem is, he can't maintain that honesty with Margaret herself. The show gives them good moments. There's a montage at the beginning of the episode, Stake Me Amadeus, showing them happy, looking at clouds, going to the aquarium, riding bikes, taking photos, kissing on a Ferris wheel. For a brief time, the fantasy seems to work, but then everything falls apart. Mordecai plans a fancy dinner at Stake Me Amadeus. He's going to ask Margaret to officially be his girlfriend. In the middle of a shootout with a robot bear, while bullets are flying, Mordecai finally asks the question. "The last few weeks I have spent with you have been the best weeks of my life. Margaret, will you be my girlfriend?" Margaret's face is happy for a second. Then it turns sad. She shows him a letter. "I got into my dream school." She starts crying. "I really like you, Mordecai, and what we have is special, but I may never get this opportunity again. I'm sorry, but I can't be your girlfriend." She runs out crying. Mordecai drops to his knees, heartbroken. Everyone watches Margaret leave. The episode ends with Mordecai on the roof, looking at the sunset. Rigby brings him a soda. "You take Margaret to the airport?" "Yeah." "You want to talk about it?" "No." This is where the fantasy crashed into reality and shattered. Margaret had her own goals, her own dreams, her own life beyond being Mordecai's girlfriend. She chose her education over a relationship with a guy she'd been dating for a few weeks. That's a completely reasonable, healthy choice. But for Mordecai, who had spent years building up this fantasy, her rejection was devastating. He couldn't understand how she could choose school over him when he'd worked so hard, when he'd finally gotten everything right. The answer is simple. Margaret was a real person with real goals and real agency. And when reality met fantasy, reality won. Their chemistry was dull as ever. Mordecai was performing the entire time, still trapped in the mindset of Margaret as a prize to be won. And Margaret chose herself. She chose her education, her future, her dreams. She didn't wait around for Mordecai to figure himself out. This should have been Mordecai's wake-up call. Instead, he fell into a depression arc, unable to move forward, grieving the loss of the fantasy he'd built around her. Margaret's departure created a vacuum, and into that vacuum walked someone who seemed perfect in all the ways Margaret wasn't. Section 4. Enter CJ, the actual chemistry test. After Margaret left, Mordecai fell into a depression. He went through a whole depression arc, listening to sad music on repeat for days, refusing to leave his room, telling Rigby that something died inside him, his heart. He was stuck, unable to move forward, grieving a relationship that never really existed in the first place. And then Rigby did something that actually helped. He signed Mordecai up for Couple Corral, a dating website. Mordecai went on a series of terrible dates with women who had nothing in common with him. And then he met CJ. In the episode Yes Dude Yes, their first meeting is completely different from how Mordecai met Margaret. CJ shows up late to their date and immediately apologizes. Mordecai is honest with her. He admits that his friend forced him to come, that he's been depressed about someone else, that he's not really interested in dating right now. Most people would walk away from that kind of honesty. CJ suggests they just be friends instead, that maybe she can help cheer him up. This is the foundation the relationship is built on, honesty and friendship first. They go to an arcade. CJ beats the high score on a video game. They play air hockey. They eat grilled cheese sandwiches and talk about movies. There's a whole montage of them hanging out, looking at clouds, kart racing through a grocery store, getting chased by security, skating together, going to concerts, playing laser tag. CJ laughs at Mordecai's stories about the park's constant disasters. And when Mordecai offers her his extra movie tickets, she immediately says yes. She's excited. They're already laughing together about the movie before they even see it. Compare this to Margaret. With Margaret, Mordecai changed his entire opinion about a band just because she mentioned she was going to their concert. With CJ, they already like the same things. Video games, rock bands, laser tag. They're already friends. They're already comfortable around each other. CJ is 5'8", a cloud humanoid with the ability to turn into storm clouds when extremely angry. Her father is Carl Putter, a mini-golf champion. These details matter because they show CJ as a fully realized character from the start. She has her own life, her own interests, her own family drama. But then the episode takes a turn. Mordecai sees Margaret with a guy on one knee. He thinks she's getting engaged. He spirals back into depression. And when he finally works up the courage to tell Margaret how he feels, he discovers the guy was her cousin John, who just got a new prosthetic leg. Margaret asks Mordecai to see the same movie with her. Mordecai says yes and calls it a date. CJ overhears this. She's crushed. Mordecai tries to explain that he thought they had an understanding, that they were just friends. CJ can't believe he's saying that after everything they've done together. Her eyes glow red. She transforms into a massive storm cloud. Rain pours down inside the coffee shop. Wind destroys furniture. A tornado forms. Mordecai has to grab onto the wall to avoid being blown away. He shouts over the storm that he knows how it feels to have feelings for someone who doesn't feel the same, that he's been there, that he's sorry. CJ calms down, returns to normal. She tells him he should have at least been honest about there being someone else. She looks at him sadly and says she can't be friends with him right now. Then she leaves. CJ walks away with dignity. She doesn't beg. She doesn't make Mordecai choose. She recognizes that he hurt her, sets a boundary, and leaves. Fast forward to the episode New Year's Kiss. Mordecai is at a masquerade party. He meets a girl. They connect, they laugh, and at midnight, they kiss. When they take off their masks, Mordecai realizes it's CJ. She realizes it's Mordecai. She runs away, embarrassed and confused. But this accidental kiss sets something in motion. Unlike with Margaret, where every interaction was fraught with performance and anxiety, Mordecai and CJ already know they like each other. They just need to figure out if they can trust each other. In the episode Playdate, CJ agrees to help Mordecai babysit Death's son, Thomas. When Thomas tries to sabotage their date by causing chaos, CJ calls him out. She tells him she's been looking forward to this date for a long time, and she's sick of him messing it up. Mordecai looks at her in awe. She's been looking forward to this for a long time. She wants to be with him. And at the end of the episode, they share their first intentional kiss. CJ tells him he doesn't need to impress her because she already thinks he's cool. Mordecai says he thinks the same about her. The episode Real Date shows them officially together. They're playing board games with Rigby and Eileen. Eileen asks how long they've been together, and CJ says they've been hanging out for about a month. Rigby and Eileen are shocked. Hanging out sounds pretty casual. They ask if Mordecai and CJ have ever been on a nice, romantic date. A real date. So Mordecai plans one. He makes a reservation at a fancy restaurant. He buys CJ a charm bracelet with a charm for every activity they did the first time they met. A roller skate, a grilled cheese, an air hockey mallet, a shopping cart, a laser gun, a go-kart. Rigby sees the bracelet and is impressed. This is the kind of thing that professionals get their girlfriends. The date itself is chaotic. The CEO of Couple Corral stalks them, trying to get Mordecai to break up with CJ and rejoin the dating site. He shows up at the restaurant. He follows them in his car. He appears in a blimp. He eventually tries to kill CJ with a bazooka designed specifically to break up couples. Mordecai pushes CJ out of the way and takes the hit. He's lying on the beach, seemingly dead. The charm bracelet melted in his hand. CJ transforms into a storm cloud and destroys the CEO with lightning. Then she holds Mordecai's body and cries over him until her tears wake him up. Mordecai wakes up and shows her that he only survived because the gift box took most of the impact. The charms have all melted together into a single heart shape. CJ puts the bracelet on and says she loves it. Mordecai tells her he got his wish, for a cute girlfriend who likes him back. They kiss as the sun rises. This episode is absurd and over the top, classic regular show chaos. But underneath is something real. Mordecai literally took a bullet for CJ. He was willing to die to protect her, and she cried over his body, thinking she'd lost him. Behind the scenes, the show's creators acknowledged that CJ represented a better approach to relationships. The CJ storyline was about Mordecai having new opportunities and learning to avoid repeating his past mistakes. The show was deliberately showing viewers what a healthier relationship could look like. With Margaret, every moment felt forced. Mordecai was always trying too hard, always performing, always terrified of messing up. With CJ, he could just be himself. They laughed together. They had fun together. They shared actual interests: video games, rock music, grilled cheese sandwiches, stupid movies. Her storm cloud abilities work as a visual metaphor. When she feels betrayed or hurt, she literally becomes a storm. This shows that CJ is capable of intense feelings, both positive and negative. She's passionate. She's real. And most importantly, CJ chose Mordecai. Multiple times. She agreed to babysit with him. She told him she'd been looking forward to their date for a long time. She forgave him after the incident at the coffee shop and gave him another chance. She stayed through the chaos of their restaurant date. She put on the melted charm bracelet and loved it anyway. This is the relationship Margaret never was. Two people who actually know each other, actually like each other, actually choose each other. CJ wasn't a fantasy. She was real. And for a while, it seemed like Mordecai had finally learned from his mistakes with Margaret. It seemed like he'd grown. It seemed like he'd found something worth keeping. For a while, it seemed like Mordecai had learned, had grown, had found something real, and then Margaret came back. Before we get going, I'd love for you to subscribe. Totally free, and it really helps us grow this community. Enough talking, let's begin. Section 5. The Christmas Kiss, when the past refuses to die. In the episode Merry Christmas, Mordecai, Mordecai and CJ are celebrating their first Christmas together. Everything is going well. They're happy. They're in love. Mordecai is excited about going to Eileen's Christmas party with his girlfriend. And then Eileen drops the bomb. Margaret is going to be there. Mordecai immediately panics. He spits out his coffee. He starts hyperventilating. His exact words capture his fear perfectly. If Margaret is at the party, and CJ is at the party, and he's at the party, if he sees Margaret and acts weird around her, CJ is going to think he still likes her. Rigby tries to calm him down. Maybe if he just avoids her, nothing bad will happen. But Eileen tells him Margaret is on her way to the coffee shop right now. Mordecai runs away, literally fleeing out the door. Later, Benson tells Mordecai to take a package to the post office. Rigby reassures him that Margaret is not going to be lurking around every corner of the city. Mordecai tries to calm himself down. She's just a person. He's just a person. Two people, no big deal. He opens the door to the post office. Margaret is standing right there. Mordecai immediately closes the door in shock. When he opens it again, he's sweating, nervous, stumbling over his words. He tells Margaret he really got into running after she left as a health thing, then literally runs away from her while faking a phone call from Benson. Rigby calls this pulling a Mordecai. It's a pattern. It's what Mordecai does when he's uncomfortable. He runs, he lies, he avoids. CJ calls to ask about the party. Mordecai is so nervous he can barely speak. When she asks if he's going to pick her up, he just makes a long, extended groaning sound. Rigby has to grab the phone and answer for him. Then Rigby lays down the hard truth. Mordecai is acting like a dumb baby. He's wimping up the holidays. If he really cares about CJ, he'll go to the party with her. Margaret will be there. Big deal. She'll be gone after that, and he'll probably never see her again. So Mordecai goes to the party. He's nervous. When he sees Margaret walk through the front door, he panics and kisses CJ to avoid having to acknowledge Margaret's presence. CJ notices his face is really sweaty. Mordecai drags her to the soda table, trying to stay as far from Margaret as possible. But Margaret approaches them. She introduces herself to CJ. There's an awkward moment when Margaret learns that CJ is Mordecai's girlfriend. Margaret seems stunned and a bit upset by this news. The three of them stand there in uncomfortable silence until Margaret excuses herself. Then CJ confronts Mordecai. So that's why he's been acting so weird. Mordecai tries to deny it, then admits the truth. He hasn't seen Margaret since they broke up, and he doesn't know what to do. He was worried that acting weird would give CJ the wrong impression, like he still likes Margaret or something. CJ asks the question directly. Well, do you? And Mordecai gives the perfect answer. No. He doesn't feel that way about her anymore. He's with CJ. That's all he cares about. CJ kisses him. That's all she needed to know. They spend the rest of the party having fun together. Everything is fine. This should have been the end of it. Mordecai communicated honestly. CJ trusted him. They moved forward together. The episode could have ended here, with Mordecai successfully navigating an awkward situation like a mature adult. But then the mistletoe disco ball falls into a bowl of eggnog. It starts glowing red. Mordecai and Margaret are surrounded by reflections of each other, trapped in some kind of magical memory space. Margaret's reflections ask him why he's acting weird, why he won't just talk to her. Mordecai tries to walk away, but the reflections are everywhere. Margaret says she doesn't want things to be like this between them. Things are complicated now, Mordecai says. Margaret responds that things are only complicated if he shuts her out. Then Margaret says something that changes everything. She knows things didn't end the way they wanted them to, but at least they had some good times together, didn't they? Doesn't that mean anything to him? Mordecai thinks for a moment. Then he says yes, it does mean something. But things are different now. A lot has happened since they broke up. It was really rough for him at first, but since he's been dating CJ, he feels a lot happier. She's good for him. He hopes Margaret can understand that. Margaret says she does understand. She didn't think he was going to wait for her. She's really glad for him. He deserves to be happy. This is perfect. This is closure. This is two people who cared about each other acknowledging their shared history while accepting that they've moved on. They smile at each other, they hug. Margaret says Merry Christmas. Mordecai says Merry Christmas back. And then the show betrays everything it just built. A montage plays of Mordecai and Margaret's best moments together. Riding bikes, having pizza and laughing, visiting an aquarium, taking pictures in a photo booth. All footage from the episode Stake Me Amadeus, from back when they were briefly happy. The montage ends with their kiss from the episode Meteor Moves. And then, in the present, Mordecai and Margaret kiss. Again. For real. They pull away immediately. Mordecai holds his hands up in defense, saying he didn't mean to do it. Margaret says she knew it wasn't. She can't even finish the sentence. And then CJ sees them. She's standing in the doorway. She looks at Mordecai and Margaret, devastated. She turns gray and storms out. Mordecai chases after her, but she's already driving away. He runs back inside to get his phone to call her. And that's when he discovers the third thing Eileen was trying to tell him all day. Margaret is Eileen's new roommate. She's finishing her degree by working at the news station. She'll be staying here. She's back in Mordecai's life permanently. Margaret stands at the end of the hall. She stares at Mordecai. He stares back. No words are exchanged. The episode ends. This episode is devastating because it shows how fragile trust is and how quickly it can be destroyed. CJ trusted Mordecai. She asked him directly if he still had feelings for Margaret. He said no. He told her she was all he cared about. She believed him. She went to the party and had fun with him because she trusted him. And then she walked in on him kissing Margaret. The show tries to blame the magical mistletoe disco ball, like it forced them to kiss through some kind of enchantment. But that's a cop-out. The disco ball didn't make them kiss. The montage of their happy memories created an emotional moment. And in that emotional moment, Mordecai and Margaret chose to kiss each other. They leaned in. They made contact. They held it for several seconds. This is the single most consequential episode in the entire love triangle storyline. Everything that follows stems from this moment. The trust between Mordecai and CJ is shattered. The door that should have closed on Margaret stays open. The pattern of Mordecai being unable to fully commit to the present because he's trapped in the past becomes undeniable. And the worst part? CJ gave Mordecai every opportunity to be honest with her. When she noticed he was acting weird, she asked him directly. When Margaret introduced herself, CJ could have been jealous or insecure, but she handled it maturely. When Mordecai admitted he was nervous about seeing his ex, CJ kissed him and told him that's all she needed to know. CJ did everything right. She communicated, she trusted, she gave Mordecai the benefit of the doubt, and he betrayed that trust by kissing Margaret anyway. The episode also reveals something crucial that makes everything worse. In the next episode, Sad Sacks, we learn that Margaret's contact photo in Mordecai's phone is still a romantic picture of them together. Her ringtone is still a custom song he sang about her. This means that the entire time Mordecai was dating CJ, through all their fun dates, through the charm bracelet, through him taking a bullet for her, every time Margaret called or texted, Mordecai saw that romantic photo and heard that song. He never changed it. He kept that shrine to Margaret active in his phone while telling CJ he didn't feel that way about Margaret anymore. That's keeping all your options open. That's refusing to fully commit. That's hedging your bets. CJ deserved better than this. She deserved a boyfriend who actually closed the door on his ex instead of keeping one foot in the past. She deserved someone who changed his ex's contact photo to something neutral instead of keeping a romantic shrine. She deserved someone who didn't kiss his ex at a Christmas party while his girlfriend was in the bathroom. The episode, Merry Christmas, Mordecai, should have been a triumphant moment of closure. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. It showed that Mordecai hadn't learned anything from his time with Margaret. He was still the same person who couldn't make a choice, who couldn't fully commit, who kept all his options open instead of choosing one person. And the tragic irony is that Mordecai had already found someone better. CJ was everything Margaret wasn't. Honest, communicative, fun, compatible with him. They shared actual interests. They had real chemistry. She chose him, repeatedly, even after he hurt her. She was willing to work through problems instead of running away. And Mordecai threw it all away for a kiss with someone who had already rejected him once. Someone who chose her education over him. Someone who was now his best friend's roommate and would be a permanent fixture in his life, whether he liked it or not. This episode perfectly demonstrates how unresolved feelings poison new relationships. Mordecai thought he was over Margaret. He probably genuinely believed he was over her when he told CJ he didn't feel that way anymore. But when faced with Margaret in person, surrounded by memories of their good times together, he couldn't help himself. The feelings came flooding back. The past refused to die. And CJ paid the price for Mordecai's inability to let go. This betrayal set the template for everything that followed. A pattern of Mordecai being unable to let Margaret go even when he had something better. Section 6. The Universe Conspiracy Theory. Was Mordecai sabotaged or self-sabotaging? Here's where Mordecai's defenders step in with their biggest argument. The universe conspired against him. Bad luck, unfortunate timing, magical disco balls, helicopter physics. How could anyone navigate a relationship when reality itself seems designed to make you fail? Let's examine this theory by looking at the actual incidents people point to. In the episode 1000th Chopper Flight Party, CJ volunteers at a river cleanup so Mordecai can go to Margaret's dad's party without her. She trusts him. She tells him to have fun. She's being the mature, understanding girlfriend who recognizes that Margaret is part of Mordecai's life, and that's okay. Mordecai gets invited to ride in Chopper 6 for its 1000th flight. He's sitting in the helicopter with Margaret and her parents. They're having a nice time. Margaret asks him why he's being so weird, and he admits things are still awkward between them. She suggests they try to have fun like they used to. Mordecai agrees and starts doing traffic reporter impressions. They both laugh together. Then the helicopter jerks. Mordecai loses his balance and falls directly onto Margaret's lap. Down on the ground, CJ has just arrived. Someone got chemical burns from the river water, and they sent everyone home early. The first thing CJ sees when she looks up is Mordecai on top of Margaret in a helicopter, both of them laughing. She transforms into a storm cloud and attacks the helicopter. Defenders say this was pure bad luck. The helicopter jerked. Physics happened. Mordecai couldn't control where he fell. This is the universe conspiring against him. But let's back up. Why was Mordecai in the helicopter in the first place? Margaret's dad, Frank, offered him the extra seat. Frank specifically mentioned that Mordecai is family to him, whether or not he and Margaret are a couple. This was a sweet gesture. It was also completely optional. Mordecai could have said, "No thanks," enjoyed the party from the ground, grabbed his piece of cake for CJ, and left. But he said yes. He got in a helicopter with his ex-girlfriend and her parents while his current girlfriend was at a volunteer event. And here's what makes it worse. Mordecai spent the entire party trying to avoid Margaret. There's a whole montage of Rigby running interference, shoving deviled eggs at Margaret, drawing marker lines to keep her away, pushing Margaret's cousins at her. Mordecai knew being around Margaret was dangerous. He knew it made him act weird. He knew CJ would be uncomfortable if she found out. And then when offered a chance to sit in an enclosed space with Margaret for an extended period of time, he took it. The helicopter jerking was bad luck. Falling on Margaret's lap was bad luck. But being in that position in the first place? That was a choice. Then there's the episode Sad Sacks, which follows directly after the Christmas kiss. Mordecai is trying to apologize to CJ. He brings her a giant candy shaped like a butt that says, "Sorry, I'm such a butt." He brings her a mixtape where all the songs are apologies. CJ is about to forgive him when Margaret calls. And here's the damning detail. Margaret's ringtone is still that custom song Mordecai sang about her in the episode Butt Dial. Her contact photo is still a romantic selfie of the two of them together. CJ sees the phone light up with Margaret's smiling face and hears the love song Mordecai recorded. She immediately turns into a storm cloud and destroys the coffee shop. Defenders say this was an accident. Mordecai forgot to change his ringtone. He didn't mean for CJ to see it. But here's the thing. That ringtone and contact photo required active maintenance. After the Christmas kiss, after CJ literally drove away crying, after Mordecai spent a week trying to win her back, he still had a romantic shrine to Margaret in his phone. Every single time Margaret called or texted for months, through all his dates with CJ, through the charm bracelet, through him taking a bullet for her, Mordecai saw that photo and heard that song. That's keeping all your options open. That's refusing to fully commit. That's a choice, repeated daily, to maintain a connection to someone who already broke your heart. Later in Sad Sacks, after multiple failed apology attempts, Mordecai asks Margaret to talk to CJ and clear the air. Margaret agrees to meet him at the park. They talk. Margaret says she's sorry for any trouble she caused and that she doesn't think getting involved is a good idea. Mordecai agrees. She tells him CJ will come around. They hug. CJ drives past the park at that exact moment and sees them hugging. Defenders call this terrible timing. What are the odds CJ would drive past at that exact moment? But again, why was Mordecai meeting with Margaret in public in the first place? Why was he hugging her when he knew CJ was already upset about them? Why couldn't he have this conversation over the phone, or at Margaret's apartment, or literally anywhere CJ wouldn't accidentally see them? Because on some level, Mordecai wanted to see Margaret. He wanted to talk to her. He wanted that physical contact. And he kept putting himself in situations where that could happen. Now let's talk about regular show's use of magical realism and what it actually represents. Regular show operates on cartoon logic. Characters die and come back. Magical disco balls exist. Storm cloud girlfriends are real. The show uses its surreal elements as visual metaphors for emotional and psychological states. When CJ turns into a storm cloud, she's literally becoming her anger and hurt. When a magical disco ball traps Mordecai and Margaret in a memory space, it's externalizing Mordecai's inability to let go of the past. When Mordecai accidentally butt dials Margaret and leaves a singing voicemail, it's showing how his unconscious feelings leak out despite his attempts to control them. The universe sabotaging Mordecai is just the show's way of visualizing Mordecai sabotaging himself. Think about the Christmas episode. The mistletoe disco ball creates a magical space where Mordecai and Margaret are surrounded by memories of their relationship. They have an honest conversation about their feelings. They get closure, they hug, and then they kiss. People blame the disco ball. The magic made them do it. But the disco ball just created an emotional atmosphere. It showed them their memories and gave them privacy. The actual decision to kiss was theirs. They looked at each other. They leaned in. They made contact. They held it. The show uses magical realism specifically so defenders can say, well, it was magic, while the show itself is saying, this is what it looks like when someone can't let go. In the episode Butt Dial, Mordecai's phone accidentally calls Margaret while he's singing a love song about her in the golf cart. He's mortified. He and Rigby spend the entire episode trying to delete the message before Margaret hears it. They get sucked into a virtual messaging control center. They almost get erased from existence. Eventually, Margaret hears the message anyway and thinks it's funny. She sets it as Mordecai's custom ringtone. People say this was an accident. He sat on his phone. It could happen to anyone. But Mordecai was alone in a golf cart singing a love song about how hot Margaret is and how he hopes someday they can be more than friends. He was fantasizing about her. He was indulging in those feelings instead of shutting them down. The butt dial wasn't the universe conspiring against him. It was his unconscious feelings manifesting in physical reality through the show's cartoon logic. Every accident in regular show follows this pattern. The show takes an internal psychological state and makes it external and literal. Mordecai can't stop thinking about Margaret, so he accidentally calls her. Mordecai can't let go of the past, so a magic disco ball traps him in memories. Mordecai keeps putting himself near Margaret, so he keeps ending up in compromising positions with her. The helicopter jerked because Mordecai was in a situation he shouldn't have been in, and the show needed to create a physical consequence for that choice. Margaret called because Mordecai still had her as a priority contact with a romantic ringtone. CJD drove by because Mordecai made a visible, public gesture toward Margaret that betrayed CJ's trust. The universe conspiracy theory gives Mordecai an excuse for his patterns of behavior. It lets defenders say, well, how could he control the helicopter physics? Instead of asking, why was he in the helicopter? But the show is smarter than that. Regular show has always used its absurdist elements to comment on real human behavior. The whole show is about two slackers who avoid responsibility and create chaos through their poor decisions. When a cursed video game tries to kill them, it's because they're neglecting their work to play games. When an evil hot dog tries to eat them, it's because they were fighting over food instead of sharing. When an evil internet being stalks Margaret, it's because Mordecai can't just talk to her like a normal person. The magical chaos is always a consequence of a character flaw or bad decision. It's never random. It's always earned. So when people say the universe sabotaged Mordecai's relationship with CJ, what they're actually saying is that Mordecai's own unresolved feelings and inability to commit sabotaged his relationship with CJ. And the show visualized that through magical realism. The helicopter jerked because Mordecai put himself in a bad situation. Margaret called at the wrong time because Mordecai never changed her ringtone. CJ drove by at the wrong moment because Mordecai was publicly hugging his ex. The mistletoe disco ball made them kiss because Mordecai never actually let go of Margaret. These aren't accidents. They're consequences visualized through the show's signature surrealist style. And even if we grant Mordecai some genuinely bad luck, even if we say, okay, some of this was outside his control, there's still one moment that's completely indefensible. One choice that was purely his own and had nothing to do with magic or physics or timing. Before we get into it, if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. It's free, and it really supports what we're building here. All right, let's go. Section 7, The Wedding Speech, the unforgivable moment. In the episode, Dumped at the Altar, Mordecai does something so spectacularly selfish, so monumentally cruel, that even his most devoted defenders struggle to justify it. He hijacks his best friend's wedding to have a public existential crisis about his love life, humiliates his girlfriend in front of everyone they know, and ruins what should have been Muscle Man's perfect day. This is Mordecai at his absolute worst. The episode starts with Mordecai and CJ in an awkward place. Margaret has recently admitted she has feelings for him. CJ has been out of town visiting friends, so they haven't had a chance to talk about it. When CJ calls, their conversation is stilted and uncomfortable. Rigby asks what Mordecai is going to do. Mordecai insists everything is fine. It's Muscle Man's wedding day. The park workers are setting up for the ceremony. Everything is going according to plan until Muscle Man has a meltdown because he can't find the letter his late father left for him to read on his wedding day. Without that letter, Muscle Man refuses to get married. Mordecai and Rigby are sent to Muscle Man's trailer to find the letter. While searching through mountains of trash, Rigby drops a bombshell. He and Eileen have been dating for months. They have matching bracelets. Mordecai never even noticed. Rigby Torres tells Mordecai that he deserves to be happy, that relationships don't need to be complicated. that Mordecai should go with his gut for once. Rigby never thinks things through and his life rules. They find the letter just as Muscle Man is about to call off the wedding. Muscle Man is so emotional he can't read it himself, so he asks Mordecai to read it for him. Mordecai stands at the microphone and reads Muscle Dad's letter aloud. The letter is beautiful. It talks about finding the right co-pilot for the highway of life. It acknowledges that doubts are normal in any relationship, and then it gives Muscle Man advice. When you're wondering if you've made the right choice, remember the old Sorenstein rule. Trust your gut. Mordecai reads those words. Trust your gut. He looks out at the crowd and sees Margaret. He sees CJ. He has a realization. And then, instead of finishing the letter and stepping away from the microphone, Mordecai keeps talking. He interrupts the ceremony to announce that Muscle Dad is right. Finding the right person is hard. For a while, Mordecai has been telling himself there's no such thing as soulmates, but now he's not so sure. He points at Muscle Man and Starla and says they were designed for each other. Then he asks, "Where's my soulmate? Are they in this room?" It could be anyone. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's that really old lady over there. He doesn't know. Benson whispers angrily from the audience, asking why Mordecai is still talking. Mordecai stammers that his point is that he doesn't know if there's one perfect person out there for him, but he knows that for a long time he's been ignoring his gut. Because he didn't want to hurt anyone. But instead of saving their feelings, it's just made everyone around him miserable. For the first time, he's going to take Rigby's advice. He walks over to CJ and says he needs to tell her something. CJ stands up. Her eyes are filled with tears. She tells him to stop. She already knows what he's going to say, so he should save it. Then she asks the question that breaks everything. You don't know who your soulmate is? Mordecai has no answer. He's speechless. CJ takes off the charm bracelet he gave her. The one with charms representing every activity they did the first time they met. The one that survived a bazooka blast and melted into a heart shape. The symbol of everything they built together, and hands. Gives it back to him. She points out that he didn't even point in her direction when he was scanning the room asking where his soulmate might be. Then she runs out crying. Muscle Man, furious, asks Mordecai if he's finished hijacking his wedding, and if it's okay if they actually get married now. Starla adds that the sooner they finish, the sooner they can start up the deep fryers. Mordecai apologizes and runs off. Let's break down everything wrong with this moment. First, the setting. This is Muscle Man's wedding. Muscle Man, who has been Mordecai's co-worker and friend for years. Muscle Man, who just had an emotional breakdown because he couldn't find his father's letter. Muscle Man, who is about to marry the love of his life in front of all their friends and family. Mordecai turns that moment into a referendum on his own romantic confusion. He doesn't pull CJ aside after the ceremony. He doesn't wait until the reception to have a private conversation. He doesn't even finish reading the letter first. He just grabs the microphone at the altar and makes Muscle Man's wedding about himself. That's narcissism. That's treating other people's major life events as props in your personal drama. Second, the method. Mordecai doesn't break up with CJ. He doesn't say he has feelings for Margaret. He doesn't give her any clarity at all. Instead, he announces to a room full of people that he doesn't know who his soulmate is and scans the crowd like he's shopping for options. He publicly declares his uncertainty about their relationship while she's sitting right there. In front of Margaret. In front of all their friends. In front of strangers attending the wedding. That's humiliation. That's cruelty. That's taking someone who trusted you and destroying that trust in the most public way possible. Third, the timing. CJ was about to tell Mordecai something. Right before the ceremony started, she said she'd been doing a lot of thinking and was interrupted by Benson on the radio. She had clearly spent the week working through her feelings about the Margaret situation and was ready to talk. Mordecai didn't give her that chance. He didn't wait to hear what she had to say. He made his decision in the middle of reading someone else's wedding letter and acted on it immediately. Consequences be damned. Fourth, the content of what he said. Mordecai admits he's been ignoring his gut because he didn't want to hurt anyone. He acknowledges that instead of saving people's feelings, he's made everyone around him miserable. This is supposed to be a moment of growth, self-awareness, finally being honest. But here's the thing. If you genuinely realize you've been making people miserable by avoiding honesty, the solution is not to publicly humiliate your girlfriend at a wedding. The solution is to have a private, respectful conversation where you actually communicate like an adult. Mordecai frames this as bravery, as finally being honest, as trusting his gut for the first time. But it's not brave to blow up your relationship in front of an audience. It's cowardly. It's forcing your girlfriend into a position where she has to either make a scene or leave quietly while you get to have your big dramatic moment of self-discovery. And fifth, the aftermath. After CJ leaves, Mordecai tells Rigby they're taking a break for a while. Rigby points out that when he said, "Go with your gut," he didn't mean completely lose your mind and try to dump your girlfriend at a wedding. Mordecai responds that he's no good at this stuff. Maybe he's not cut out for romance. Rigby agrees that he's the worst. But here's what Mordecai doesn't do. He doesn't take responsibility. He doesn't say he was wrong to do it that way. He doesn't acknowledge that he just committed an unforgivable act of public betrayal. He frames it as a personality flaw. "Oh, I'm just bad at romance," instead of a moral failing. Being bad at romance is forgetting an anniversary. Being bad at romance is giving a thoughtless gift. Being bad at romance is not knowing how to express your feelings. Hijacking a wedding to publicly declare you're unsure if your girlfriend is your soulmate is not being bad at romance. It's being a bad person. The charm bracelet moment is particularly devastating. CJ hands it back to him and points out that he didn't even gesture in her direction when scanning the room for potential soulmates. That bracelet represented everything good about their relationship. The friendship foundation, the shared activities, the genuine connection. She's returning it because Mordecai just proved that none of that mattered to him. He was so busy looking for his fantasy soulmate that he couldn't see the real person standing right in front of him who had chosen him repeatedly despite all his failures. Even Mordecai's defenders struggle with this episode. The consensus seems to be that the wedding speech was indefensible. There's no universe conspiracy theory to blame, no magical disco ball, no helicopter physics. This was pure, unfiltered Mordecai making the worst possible choice in the worst possible way. The episode is titled "Dumped at the Altar," which is darkly ironic because Mordecai is not the one getting married. He's not the one at the altar, but he makes it about himself anyway, and in doing so, he dumps CJ in the most brutal way imaginable. This moment crystallizes why Mordecai didn't deserve either woman. Margaret saw him as a friend who couldn't let go of the past. CJ saw him as a boyfriend who couldn't commit to the present. Both of them were right. Mordecai spent years chasing Margaret, turning her into a fantasy prize. When he finally had a chance to build something real with CJ, he sabotaged it by refusing to let Margaret go. And when forced to make a choice, he didn't choose either of them. He chose to blow everything up and feel sorry for himself. That's a person who cares more about his own emotional journey than the actual human beings he's hurting along the way. Muscle Man got his wedding eventually. CJ left with whatever dignity she could salvage. Margaret watched the whole disaster unfold. And Mordecai walked away having learned nothing except that he's the worst at relationships, which he treats as an unchangeable fact about himself, rather than a pattern of behavior he could work to fix. This brings us to the question of CJ herself. Was she perfect, or did she have her own fatal flaws? Before we kick things off, a small favor. Subscribe if you enjoy this content. It costs nothing and helps us make more for this community. Let's begin. Section 8. The Storm Cloud Problem. CJ's Anger and the Cycle of Toxicity. CJ deserved better than Mordecai. She was lied to, cheated on, and repeatedly humiliated. Her anger was justified. Her hurt was real. Her reactions to being betrayed were understandable. And she also nearly killed people, multiple times. This is where the conversation about CJ gets complicated, because acknowledging that she had every right to be furious doesn't mean her responses were okay. The show gives CJ a literal superpower, the ability to transform into a storm cloud when angry, and uses it as a visual metaphor for how betrayal trauma can manifest as destructive rage. In the episode Yes, Dude, Yes, CJ and Mordecai have spent a day hanging out as friends. They beat high scores at the arcade, they played air hockey, they ate grilled cheese and talked about movies. They went to concerts and played laser tag. CJ is clearly falling for him, and Mordecai seems to be having fun too. Then Mordecai invites her to see Lovebot 2 with him. CJ immediately says yes. She's excited. This is the moment their friendship could become something more. But then Mordecai sees Margaret with her cousin John. And because John was on one knee showing off his new prosthetic leg, Mordecai thinks Margaret is getting engaged. He spirals. He goes to the coffee shop to confess his feelings to Margaret. When he discovers John is just her cousin, he asks Margaret to the same movie instead. CJ overhears this. She's standing right there with her friends. They all hear Mordecai ask Margaret on a date to the movie he already asked CJ to see. CJ confronts him. She asks what's going on. Mordecai stammers that they can work this out. CJ asks if he's dating Margaret. Margaret asks what CJ is talking about. Mordecai says no, they're just friends. Just friends. CJ's face turns dark. She asks how he can say that after everything they've done together. Mordecai insists it's true. They are just friends. He told her from the beginning he wasn't interested in dating. And then CJ transforms. Her eyes glow. Her body becomes a literal storm cloud. Rain pours down inside the coffee shop. Wind destroys furniture. A tornado forms. Mordecai has to grab onto a table to avoid being blown away. And when the table breaks free, he grabs onto the wall. He shouts over the storm that he knows it hurts to have feelings for someone who doesn't feel the same, that he's been there, that he's sorry. CJ calms down enough to tell him he should have at least been honest about there being someone else. Then she leaves. She destroyed the coffee shop. She could have killed someone. Margaret and Eileen were hiding under tables. Other customers were blown around. Property damage aside, people could have been seriously hurt. And Mordecai caused this by being dishonest and careless with someone's feelings. But CJ's response was violence. The show presents this as over the top, but somewhat justified. Mordecai did mess up. He should have told CJ about Margaret. He should have been clearer about his feelings. But the visual language of the scene, CJ literally becoming a destructive force of nature, suggests something deeper about how anger and hurt can spiral into something dangerous. In the episode 1000th Chopper Flight Party, the pattern repeats but worse. CJ volunteers at a river cleanup so Mordecai can attend Margaret's dad's party without her. She trusts him. She tells him to have fun. She's being mature and understanding about the fact that Margaret is part of his life. Then the cleanup gets canceled early because someone got chemical burns from the polluted water. CJ shows up at the party just in time to see Mordecai in a helicopter with Margaret, laughing. And then the helicopter jerks, and Mordecai falls directly onto Margaret's lap. From CJ's perspective, she trusted her boyfriend to spend time with his ex-girlfriend. And the first thing she sees is him physically on top of her. CJ transforms into a storm cloud and attacks the helicopter. She shoots lightning at it. She shakes it violently with wind. Margaret's parents fall out of the helicopter and nearly die. They only survive because Frank knows how to do a cannonball into a swimming pool from several stories up. CJ destroys the party. She blows toy helicopters into the camera crew. She tears up trees. She strikes the helicopter with lightning repeatedly while Mordecai and Margaret are still inside it. Margaret is hanging off the side of the helicopter, one hand gripping a bar, screaming. Mordecai throws away the cake CJ wanted just to save Margaret from falling. CJ almost killed Margaret's parents. She almost killed Margaret and Mordecai. She destroyed a family party celebrating a major milestone in Frank's career. All because she saw something that looked bad, but wasn't actually what it seemed. When CJ finally calms down, she's ashamed. She's crying. She tells Mordecai that this time it was her fault. Margaret's parents almost died because she freaked out about nothing. This moment is important because it shows CJ recognizes her reactions are disproportionate. She knows she took it too far. She's genuinely remorseful about nearly killing people. But the fact that it keeps happening suggests a pattern. When CJ feels betrayed or hurt, she becomes dangerous. In the episode, Not Great Double Date, Margaret admits on camera that she still has feelings for Mordecai after lying about having a boyfriend. CJ is standing right there. She starts to turn gray. Thunder rumbles. She's about to explode again, but this time, she controls it. She takes a slow breath. She calms herself down. She tells Margaret that all those things are fine, being single, having dated Mordecai, wanting to hang out with him, except for the lying. There's only one reason someone would lie about something like that. Then CJ asks Margaret directly, "Do you still have feelings for Mordecai?" Margaret admits she does. The crowd gasps. CJ doesn't transform into a storm cloud. She just makes a bitter comment about how everyone wants to start over instead of getting it right the first time, and then she leaves. This is growth. CJ controlled her anger. She communicated instead of destroying things. She walked away instead of attacking. This is the person CJ could be when she's not pushed to her breaking point. But here's the problem. Mordecai kept pushing her to that breaking point. Over and over. The Christmas kiss. The romantic ringtone. The helicopter incident. Every time CJ tried to trust him, something happened that made her feel like a fool. And every time something happened, CJ's anger got more explosive. By the time they got to the helicopter party, she was shooting lightning and nearly committing manslaughter. The show's creators acknowledged this was a problem. They mentioned in interviews that they made CJ less irrational in later episodes because they realized her anger was getting out of control. But the damage was done. The pattern was established. CJ's storm cloud ability works as a metaphor because it visualizes what emotional escalation looks like. The first time she transforms, it's rain and wind. Scary, but manageable. The second time, it's lightning and near-death experiences. Each betrayal makes her reactions more extreme. This is what happens in toxic relationships. One person's bad behavior triggers the other person's bad behavior, which triggers more bad behavior, which creates a cycle where both people bring out the worst in each other. Mordecai's emotional unavailability and inability to let go of Margaret made CJ feel insecure and paranoid. CJ's violent reactions made Mordecai afraid to be honest with her. His dishonesty led to more betrayals. Her betrayals led to more violence. Round and round until someone nearly dies in a helicopter. CJ's anger was legitimate. She had every right to be furious. But turning into a literal storm cloud and destroying everything around you is not a healthy way to process betrayal. And staying in a relationship where you're constantly being triggered to that point of rage is not healthy either. The line CJ delivers in Not Great Double Date, "Why don't you guys just get it right the first time?" is heartbreaking because it reveals her exhaustion. She's tired of being the person people apologize to. She's tired of being the one who has to decide whether to forgive or walk away. She's tired of Mordecai's pattern of screwing up and then asking for another chance. And she's also tired of being the person who loses control and hurts people when she gets angry. Because that's the other side of the storm cloud metaphor. CJ's powers are part of who she is. When she's calm, she's a cloud person. When she's angry, she's a storm. She can't separate her emotions from her physical form. Her hurt literally becomes destruction. This makes her vulnerable in a way Mordecai never was. When Mordecai was hurt, he moped in his room and listened to sad music. When CJ was hurt, she became a weapon that could kill people. That's a relationship where one person's mistakes can trigger the other person into becoming a danger to themselves and everyone around them. The show wants us to sympathize with CJ, and we should. She was wronged repeatedly. She deserved honesty and commitment and respect, and Mordecai gave her none of those things. But the show also shows us that CJ's reactions were becoming dangerous. Not just to Mordecai and Margaret, but to innocent bystanders. Margaret's parents didn't deserve to fall out of a helicopter. The coffee shop employees didn't deserve to have their workplace destroyed. The party guests didn't deserve to run for their lives. CJ's anger was justified. Her violence was not. And the fact that Mordecai kept triggering that violence, whether intentionally or through carelessness, made him a bad partner for her. Because being with him brought out a side of her that was destructive and dangerous. This is what people mean when they talk about toxic relationships. It's not that one person is evil and the other is innocent. It's that both people, together, create something harmful. Mordecai's emotional unavailability and CJ's explosive anger fed into each other until the relationship became a cycle of betrayal and destruction. By the time they broke up, both of them needed to walk away because they brought out the worst in each other. CJ deserved better than Mordecai's half-hearted commitment and emotional cheating. And Mordecai deserved to be with someone who didn't turn into a literal storm every time he made a mistake. More importantly, they both deserve to be in relationships where they could be their best selves instead of their worst ones. So if both relationships were fundamentally broken, what does that say about what Mordecai actually needed? Section 9. The art school dropout. Mordecai's real problem was never romance. Here's something most people miss when they talk about Mordecai's love life. The relationships were never the actual problem. They were symptoms, distractions, ways to avoid confronting the real issue that haunted him through the entire series. Mordecai was an art school dropout stuck in a dead-end job making $100 a month, and he was using romance as an excuse to not deal with that failure. In the episode Bad Portrait, we get a rare glimpse into why Mordecai abandoned his artistic dreams. He needs to paint a portrait of Benson for a ceremony, and he completely freezes up. He stares at a blank canvas for hours. He adjusts the lighting, fiddles with the radio, does everything except actually paint. When Rigby asks what the holdup is, Mordecai finally admits the truth. Whenever he drew portraits in college, they always went badly. People would misinterpret them or get offended. He has a flashback to art school, where a young woman asks him to draw her. He quickly sketches her and shows her the result. She runs away crying. That one moment destroyed his confidence. That one failure convinced him he couldn't do portraits, which expanded into believing he couldn't do art, which led to him dropping out and taking a groundskeeper job at a park. Think about what that means. Mordecai went to art school. He invested time and money and dreams into becoming an artist. and then he quit because someone cried at his drawing. He let one bad experience define his entire relationship with his passion. And instead of confronting that failure, instead of working through it or trying again, he buried it. He took a job that required zero artistic skill. He settled into a routine of playing video games and doing the bare minimum at work. He made $100 a month, barely enough to survive, and he stayed there for years. The show presents this as normal. Mordecai and Rigby are slackers. They avoid responsibility. They play video games instead of working. That's the premise of the show. But underneath the comedy is something genuinely sad. Mordecai is hiding from himself. And what's the perfect distraction from confronting your lack of purpose? Romance. Obsessing over a girl, spending hours working overtime to afford concert tickets, planning elaborate dates, worrying about whether she likes you back. All of that takes up mental space that could otherwise be occupied by the uncomfortable question, what am I doing with my life? In the episode Rigby's Graduation Day Special, this dynamic gets thrown into sharp relief. Rigby is graduating from high school after dropping out years earlier and finally going back to finish his diploma. The whole park is celebrating, everyone is proud of him, and Mordecai is bitter. When Rigby mentions that at the rate he's going, he'll probably get his college degree before Mordecai gets his, Mordecai's laugh is weak and forced. Rigby has accomplished something real. Rigby has growth and forward momentum. And what does Mordecai have? He holds up his video game controller with a grin and says he got really good at the game. That's the joke. That's what Mordecai has to show for his year, while Rigby was learning and growing and holding on to a steady girlfriend. Mordecai mastered a video game. Later in the episode, when everyone is preparing for Rigby's graduation party, Mordecai is asked to drive all the way to the Caffeine outlet to get Rigby's favorite seasonal coffee soda. He complains. He says graduating from high school is the least a person can accomplish. High Five Ghost has to explain to him that it's a big deal for Rigby. And Mordecai, sarcastically, says he'll be back in a really long time. The others notice something is wrong. Muscle Man asks what's with him. But they don't understand the real issue. Mordecai is watching his best friend accomplish something he himself failed at. Rigby dropped out and came back and finished. Mordecai dropped out and never went back. While driving through the desert to get the soda, Mordecai passes road signs that increasingly bother him. Going nowhere? One asks. Life in a rut? Says another. Feel like a loser? Says a third. And then the final blow, a billboard for Inspire America featuring Rigby's face. His best friend is being celebrated on national television for accomplishing something, and Mordecai is driving through a desert to buy soda, making $100 a month, living in the same room he's lived in for years, going nowhere. A tumbleweed pops his tire. He has to walk the last 2 miles to the outlet only to find it closed until 5 in the morning. He sleeps on the ground in front of the store using newspaper as a blanket. This is what Mordecai's life looks like when you strip away the romance plots. This is who he is when he's alone with himself. A guy who dropped out of art school, took a job that leads nowhere, and uses other people's achievements and other people's drama to avoid thinking about his own stagnation. When Rigby calls asking for help with his graduation speech, Mordecai is resentful. He tells Rigby to listen to a sad song and figure it out himself. Rigby is taken aback by the hostility, and later, when Rigby asks what could be more important than helping him, Mordecai finally admits the truth. He's jealous. He tells Rigby it's hard to see him doing so great, that Mordecai always kind of liked that he was doing better than Rigby before. Rigby calls him out. That sounds really messed up. And Mordecai agrees. It is messed up, but it's honest. Mordecai needed to feel superior to someone. He needed to be the one who had it more together, who was smarter, who was more capable. Because if Rigby was accomplishing things and Mordecai wasn't, then what did that say about Mordecai? The romance plots let him avoid that question. When he was chasing Margaret, he could tell himself that once he got the girl, everything would fall into place. When he was dating CJ, he could focus on relationship drama instead of career stagnation. The love triangle consumed so much mental and emotional energy that there was nothing left over for confronting the art school failure. But the show doesn't let him hide forever. The 25-year time jump at the end of the series shows us where everyone ended up. And Mordecai? He finally left the park to pursue art. He has an art studio, he's painting, he's doing what he was always meant to do. The creators explicitly confirmed this in interviews. They said Mordecai finally left the park to pursue art, and that's where he met Steph. Not at a coffee shop where he worked, not at a party where his friends were, at an art gallery or convention, surrounded by his actual passion, doing the thing he loved. That's the person Steph fell in love with. Not the groundskeeper making $100 a month. Not the guy obsessing over his ex-girlfriend. Not the emotional mess who couldn't choose between two women. She fell in love with the artist. The person Mordecai was always supposed to be, but was too scared to become. The park was Mordecai's safety net. It was easy. It required nothing from him. He could coast there forever, playing video games with Rigby, avoiding any real growth or challenge. And as long as he stayed there, he would never have to confront the fact that he gave up on his dreams. Margaret represented the fantasy that someone else could give his life meaning. If he just got the perfect girlfriend, everything would make sense. CJ represented the idea that he could have love without doing the work of becoming someone worth loving. Both relationships failed because Mordecai was trying to use them as substitutes for purpose. You can't build a healthy relationship when you're fundamentally unhappy with yourself. You can't give someone your whole heart when half of it is consumed by shame and regret and fear. You can't be present with another person when you're constantly running from your own failures. Mordecai needed to leave the park. He needed to face his fear of art. He needed to try again, risk failure again, put himself out there again. And he needed to do it alone, without a girlfriend to validate him or distract him. Only then, after he'd rebuilt himself from the ground up, after he'd become the person he was meant to be, could he meet someone as an equal? Could he offer a real partnership instead of a desperate plea for validation? The romance plots were never about finding the right person. They were about Mordecai running from himself. And until he stopped running, until he turned around and faced the art school dropout working a dead-end job, no relationship was ever going to work. This reframes everything we've discussed. Mordecai wasn't ready for love because he hadn't figured out who he was. Which brings us to the most controversial decision the show made. Just before we continue, take a second to subscribe. It's completely free and helps us keep improving these videos for you all. Now let's get into it. Section 10, In Defense of Steph, Why the Batgirl Ending Was Brilliant. The ending of regular show made a lot of fans angry. After 8 seasons of watching Mordecai chase Margaret and date CJ, after all the drama and heartbreak and will they won they, the show jumped 25 years into the future and revealed that Mordecai married a woman we'd never met before. A bad artist named Steph who appears for maybe 90 seconds total with 0 speaking lines. People felt cheated. They felt like the entire Margaret and CJ storyline was pointless. They complained that Mordecai ended up with a stranger, that Steph was just some random character the writers pulled out of nowhere to avoid making a real choice. But here's the thing. The Steph ending was perfect, and it was perfect specifically because she was a stranger. The finale jumps forward 25 years after the park crew saves the universe from anti-pops. We see where everyone ended up. Rigby married Eileen. They have 2 kids. Muscle Man and Starla have kids. Benson is with Pam. And Mordecai? He's at an art gallery showing off his work. The montage shows him signing autographs for his paintings. A woman bumps into him while she's also signing autographs for her artwork. They look at each other. The camera zooms in on their eyes meeting. That's how they met. 2 artists, 2 successful people, 2 equals. Cut to the 25-year park reunion. Mordecai arrives with Steph and their 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter, all Blue Jay and Bat hybrids. Steph is wearing a sun hat and chatting with Eileen while Mordecai reconnects with Rigby, and their teenage kids mess around on their phones. They look comfortable. They look happy. They look like a family that works. And fans hated it. In a Reddit AMA, head writer Matt Price explained the decision. We felt like the Margaret/CJ story was complete, and they were both on their own path already. We also felt like Mordecai had moved on in his life. He finally left the park to pursue art, and we thought it'd be cool if he met someone while doing that. But we love Margaret and CJ, and we're sure that they're happy without Mordecai. He was too wishy-washy with them. That last line is crucial. He was too wishy-washy with them. The creators are admitting that Mordecai messed up both relationships so badly that neither woman would have taken him back. And more importantly, neither woman should have taken him back. Margaret moved on. She went to college, pursued her career in journalism, lived her own life. CJ became a professional dodgeball player. According to Matt Price, she no longer speaks to Mordecai, Rigby, Eileen, or any of them. She cut ties completely. These women didn't sit around waiting for Mordecai to get his act together. They moved forward without him. And that's realistic. That's what happens in real life when you treat people badly. Sometimes bridges burn and stay burned. Sometimes people leave your life and never come back. Sometimes you mess up so badly that there's no third chance, no grand romantic gesture that fixes everything, no moment of redemption that makes it all okay. The show could have gone the easy route. It could have had Mordecai chase Margaret for one more season and finally win her over. It could have had him realize CJ was the one all along and beg for forgiveness. Either choice would have given fans the closure they thought they wanted. But both choices would have been a lie. Because Mordecai in his 20s was not ready to be in a healthy relationship with anyone. He was an art school dropout stuck in a dead-end job making $100 a month. He was using romance as a distraction from his lack of purpose. He was emotionally unavailable, commitment-phobic, and so consumed by his own insecurity that he hurt everyone around him. Giving that version of Mordecai either Margaret or CJ would have been a reward he didn't earn. It would have sent the message that you can treat people terribly and still get what you want as long as you're persistent enough. That love conquers all, even when you've shown no real growth or change. The show refused to do that. Instead, it made Mordecai earn his happy ending. The 25-year time jump represents all the work Mordecai did off-screen that we didn't see. He left the park. He pursued his art. He faced his fear of failure. He built a career. He became a successful artist with his own studio. He grew up. And then, only then, when he was finally a complete person with his own purpose and passion, he met Steph. They met at an art gallery, through their shared work, through the thing they both loved. Mordecai wasn't working in a park trying to impress a waitress anymore. He wasn't fumbling around desperately hoping someone would validate him. He was doing what he loved, what he was always meant to do. And he met someone who was doing the same thing. That's how healthy relationships actually start. Two people who have their own lives, their own passions, their own identities, meeting as equals and choosing to build something together. Not one person trying to use another person to fill a void. Not someone chasing a fantasy or settling for whoever will have them. Just two adults who like each other and decide to share their lives. The wiki notes that during the 25 years later comic, when Steph meets Margaret for the first time, she's visibly jealous and annoyed that Mordecai never told her about his ex. This shows Steph has her own personality, her own feelings, her own boundaries. She's a real person with insecurities and opinions. And according to the wiki, she and Mordecai seem happy and peaceful with each other. They have 3 kids together. She gets along with his friends. She chats with Eileen at the reunion. This is a person who integrated into Mordecai's life and became part of his community. That takes years. That takes work. That takes the kind of emotional maturity that 20-something Mordecai completely lacked. Creator Owen Dennis explained the ending in an interview. He said he was never a fan of media aimed at kids having characters end up with their first love because in reality, dating is complicated and messy and can end either amicably or with no closure at all. He appreciated that the show took a more realistic approach. And that's the key word, realistic. The Steph ending is realistic. Most people don't end up with their high school crush or their first serious relationship. Most people date around, make mistakes, hurt people, get hurt, learn from their failures, and eventually meet someone when they're actually ready for a real partnership. Mordecai marrying his first crush would have been a fantasy. It would have been the Disney ending where persistence and true love conquer all obstacles. But regular show was never that kind of show. It was a show about slackers who had to grow up, about people making mistakes and facing consequences, about realistic character development, even when that development was painful. The Steph ending honors all of that. It says that sometimes you mess up so badly that you lose people forever, that sometimes the right person for you is someone you haven't met yet, that sometimes you need to completely rebuild yourself before you're ready for love. It says that your past mistakes don't define you, but they do have consequences. Margaret and CJ moved on. They're both happy without Mordecai, according to the creators. They didn't need him to complete their stories. They were always whole people on their own. And Mordecai? He had to become a whole person on his own too. He had to leave the park, pursue his passion, face his fears, build a career, and learn how to be alone with himself before he could be with anyone else. The 25-year gap represents all of that invisible work. We don't see it happen because showing it would take away from the point. The point is that Mordecai's romantic happy ending wasn't the climax of his character arc. It was a side effect of him finally completing it. Steph didn't fix Mordecai. She didn't save him from his depression or give his life meaning. He did that himself first. And then he met someone who matched that energy, who shared his passions, who could be his partner instead of his salvation. That's why she's a stranger to the audience. Because the Mordecai we knew for 8 seasons, the desperate, insecure, commitment-phobic groundskeeper, would never have met her. That version of Mordecai only met people through proximity and convenience. The coffee shop waitress, the girl from a dating website, people who were just there. The version of Mordecai who met Steph was someone else entirely. Someone who put himself out there as an artist. Someone who attended galleries and showed his work. Someone who had something to offer besides neediness and potential. Matt Price mentioned they chose to make her a bat, probably just because bats are cool, and Mordecai would want to be with a cool bat girl. And yeah, that's funny, but it also makes sense. Mordecai ended up with someone he thought was cool, someone he admired, someone who impressed him with her own accomplishments rather than someone he put on a pedestal. The ending doesn't give us details about their relationship because the details don't matter. What matters is that they're happy. They have kids together. They attend park reunions together. They're still together 25 years later. That's more than Mordecai ever had with Margaret or CJ. That's the relationship he earned by finally doing the work of becoming someone worthy of it. The Steph ending only feels like a betrayal if you believed Mordecai deserved Margaret or CJ, but he didn't. He hurt them both. He was wishy-washy, as the creator said. He couldn't commit. He kept all his options open. He made them both miserable. Neither of them owed him a second chance. Neither of them needed to wait around for him to grow up. They both moved on to better things. And so did Mordecai. He moved on to becoming a better person first, and then to finding someone who fit that better version of himself. That's the show having the courage to say that sometimes the right ending is the one where you don't get what you thought you wanted, where you get what you actually needed instead. But there's still the question of emotional satisfaction versus narrative integrity. Section 11. The erasure problem. Why did everyone stop talking? There's a detail about the regular show ending that most fans don't know because it wasn't in the actual show. It came from a Reddit AMA with head writer Matt Price, and it fundamentally changes how we understand what happened to everyone after the series ended. CJ no longer speaks to Mordecai, Rigby, Eileen, or Margaret. At all. Ever again. According to Price, after everything that happened, CJ cut ties with the entire friend group. She became a professional dodgeball player and moved on with her life. And that life didn't include any of them. The people who were supposed to be her friends, Eileen, who she hung out with constantly, Rigby, who was dating Eileen, all gone from her life. And Margaret? Same thing. According to the creators, she never speaks to any of them again after the series ends. The entire friend group that used to hang out together, that went on double dates, that celebrated holidays together, just dissolved. This is the part of the ending nobody talks about. Everyone focuses on Mordecai marrying Steph, on whether he should have ended up with Margaret or CJ. But the real gut punch is that by the time Mordecai met Steph, he'd already lost both of them. Completely. Permanently. Think about what that means. At the end of the episode Rigby's graduation day special, when the park gets launched into space, everyone on the ground is watching in horror. Margaret yells, "Mordecai?" as the dome lifts off. She's concerned. She cares. When the park comes back 25 years later, you'd think they'd reconnect, catch up, maybe become friends again. They never interact again. Not once in 25 years. The finale shows Mordecai at his art studio, painting abstract art. The show specifically mentions that the paintings resemble Margaret and CJ. He's still thinking about them decades later. Still processing what happened. Still creating art inspired by relationships that ended badly. But he's not in contact with either of them. He's painting memories of people who are no longer in his life. That's devastating when you really sit with it. This isn't the typical sitcom ending where everyone stays friends and moves on gracefully. This is the messy, painful reality where some friendships don't survive the damage done to them. In the episode Rigby's graduation day special, there's a moment that foreshadows this. CJ is shown watching Rigby's graduation speech on TV, along with other people from the park's past. The camera cuts to her briefly. She's there. She's watching. She still cares about what happens to these people. But she's watching from a distance. She's already separated from the group, even before the park goes to space. That separation becomes permanent. 25 years pass, and she never reaches out. Mordecai never reaches out to her. Rigby and Eileen, who were dating when everything fell apart, somehow maintained their relationship and got married. But Eileen's friendship with CJ? Dead. Rigby's friendship with CJ? Dead. Because that's what happens when romantic drama destroys a friend group. People take sides, or they don't take sides, and that's somehow worse. The whole dynamic becomes poisoned. Seeing each other brings up painful memories. It's easier to just stop hanging out, to drift apart, to let the friendship die quietly. Except it didn't die quietly. CJ made an active choice to cut everyone off. That's what the creators confirmed. She chose to leave. And honestly, good for her. She was the one who got hurt the most. She was lied to repeatedly. She watched her boyfriend kiss his ex at Christmas. She found romantic photos and love song ringtones. She nearly committed manslaughter with weather powers because she was pushed to her breaking point over and over. Why would she want to maintain friendships with people who were connected to that trauma? Eileen was Margaret's roommate. Rigby was Mordecai's best friend. Being around them meant being reminded of the worst period of her life. So she walked away from all of it. Started fresh. Became a professional athlete. Built a new life with new people who didn't know her as that girl Mordecai dated. And she was happier for it, according to the creators. Margaret's erasure is different and somehow more tragic. She chose her education over Mordecai in the episode Stake Me Amadeus. She went to college. She pursued journalism. She came back and had that honest conversation with Mordecai at Christmas, where they acknowledged their history and agreed to move forward. And then they kissed and ruined everything. After that, Margaret becomes increasingly peripheral to the show. She appears less and less. When she does show up, her interactions with Mordecai are awkward and strained. The easy friendship they could have had, the mature, we dated once but we're over it friendship, never materializes because the Christmas kiss proved they weren't over it. By the time the park goes to space, Margaret has effectively already left the group. She yells Mordecai's name when the dome launches because of course she does. She's watching someone she cares about potentially die. But caring about someone doesn't mean you're still in their life. The 25 years later comic apparently shows Steph meeting Margaret for the first time and getting jealous that Mordecai never mentioned her, which means in 25 years of marriage, Mordecai never told his wife about Margaret, never showed her the paintings inspired by her, never explained that he had this whole intense relationship that shaped his 20s. That's Margaret being so thoroughly removed from Mordecai's life that his wife doesn't even know she exists. And Margaret did the same thing to him. She moved on completely, built her own life. According to the creators, she's happy without him. She doesn't need closure or reconnection. She's fine. But fine doesn't mean whole. Fine doesn't mean there aren't scars. Fine just means you learned to live with the damage. This is what regular show understands about relationships that most shows don't. Sometimes there's no closure. Sometimes people who were once central to your life just disappear from it. Sometimes the bridges burn so thoroughly that there's nothing left to rebuild. The show could have given us a scene in the finale where Mordecai and CJ run into each other at the reunion and have a mature conversation, where they acknowledge the past and wish each other well, where CJ meets Steph and they're cordial, where everyone gets their neat little bow. But that's not what happened, because that's often not what happens in real life. In real life, sometimes you hurt someone so badly that they never want to see you again. Sometimes you're that person. Sometimes a whole friend group implodes over romantic drama and everyone scatters. Sometimes you look back 25 years later and realize you haven't spoken to people who were once the most important parts of your life. The finale's montage showing Mordecai painting abstract art inspired by Margaret and CJ is haunting when you know this context. He's painting the ghosts of them, the memories, the what-ifs, the people they used to be to him. They're not real people in his life anymore. They're just paint on canvas, shapes and colors that remind him of feelings he used to have. That's the real tragedy of Mordecai's story. He ended up with someone good. He has a family he loves. He's successful. But he lost everyone from his past to get there. The cost of his growth was complete separation from the people who knew him when he was still figuring out who he was. Rigby and Eileen kept their relationship and stayed in his life. But Margaret and CJ? Gone. The double dates, the group hangouts, the shared history, all of it just memory. Some fans see this as sad. Some see it as realistic. Some see it as both. Because it is both. It's sad that CJ had to completely remove herself from a friend group to heal. It's sad that Margaret and Mordecai couldn't even maintain a distant friendship. It's sad that Eileen presumably lost her best friend and roommate over all of this. But it's also realistic. This is what happens when romantic relationships implode messily. This is what happens when someone can't choose between two people and ends up hurting both of them. This is what happens when trust is broken repeatedly. People leave. They protect themselves. They build new lives. And sometimes those new lives don't have room for the people from the old ones. The show doesn't apologize for this. It doesn't try to soften it or explain it away. It just presents it as fact. Mordecai messed up so badly that two women he loved completely exited his life, and they were right to do it. And he had to accept it and move forward anyway. That's a harder lesson than find the right person. That's sometimes you lose people forever and have to live with that. That's your choices have permanent consequences. That's growth often requires leaving things behind. The Steph ending works because it represents Mordecai building something entirely new with someone who doesn't carry the baggage of his past. But the erasure of Margaret and CJ is the price he paid for that clean slate. He doesn't get to keep his old friends and his new family. He had to choose, and by choosing to move forward, he lost what was behind him. That's a realistic ending, and sometimes those are the same thing. This brings us to what might be the most important question. Not who Mordecai should have ended up with, but what this love triangle says about us. Before we move on, go ahead and hit subscribe. Totally free, and it really helps us keep this going. Alright, let's continue. Section 12. The Simp Generation. Why Mordecai Still Matters. Here's a question. Why do people still argue about a cartoon bird's love life years after the show ended? Regular show's finale aired in 2017. It's been years. The show is over. The creators have explained their choices. And yet, search Mordecai regular show on any social media platform and you'll find fresh debates, fresh anger, fresh takes on whether he should have ended up with Margaret or CJ or Steph. This isn't normal. Most shows get their finale discourse and then people move on. But Mordecai's romantic failures hit different. They matter to people in a way that goes beyond typical shipping wars. Because Mordecai's story is our story. And we hate that. Let's start with the term that's now permanently attached to Mordecai's character, simp. In online discourse, Mordecai is frequently called the ultimate simp, or the OG simp. The term existed before regular show, but Mordecai became one of its most recognizable examples in cartoon form. What's a simp? Someone who does too much for someone who doesn't reciprocate. Someone who puts another person on a pedestal and degrades themselves trying to earn affection. Someone who mistakes grand gestures for genuine connection. Someone who thinks if they just try hard enough, do enough nice things, the other person will finally see their worth. Sound familiar? Because that describes millions of people's first attempt at romance. Especially for millennials and Gen Z who grew up on stories that said persistence equals love, that the nice guy eventually wins, that true love conquers all obstacles including the other person's clear disinterest. Mordecai working overtime to afford concert tickets for a girl who barely knows he exists? That's every teenager who bought expensive gifts hoping it would make their crush like them back. Mordecai changing his entire music taste to match Margaret's? That's everyone who's ever pretended to like something, just to have common ground with someone they're attracted to. The simp label stings because it's recognition. We see ourselves in Mordecai's failures, and we don't like it. But here's what makes Mordecai's story more complex than typical simp narratives. The show doesn't let him win by being persistent. Margaret rejects him, multiple times. She chooses college over him. She moves on. And when she comes back, Mordecai's inability to commit pushes her away again. Most shows reward the simp. Most shows say keep trying, wear her down, prove your love through grand gestures, and eventually she'll realize you're the one. Regular shows said, no, actually that's creepy and unhealthy, and it doesn't work, and you need to stop. That's why. People are still angry. The show broke the unspoken contract. It set up what looked like a typical guy pines for girl and eventually wins her over story, and then said, this guy doesn't deserve to win her over because he's using her as a fantasy instead of treating her like a person. And then it went further. It gave Mordecai a second chance with someone better suited for him, someone he had actual chemistry with, and showed him destroying that relationship through the exact same patterns. CJ wasn't the problem. Margaret wasn't the problem. Mordecai was the problem. That's uncomfortable to acknowledge. It's much easier to blame the writers for bad storytelling than to confront the fact that the show was holding up a mirror to an entire generation's dating dysfunction. The quarter-life crisis aspect makes it worse. Mordecai is 23 when the show starts. He's an art school dropout working a minimum-wage groundskeeper job. He lives in a shared room at his workplace. He has no clear career path. He's stuck. Who can't relate to that? Millennials graduated into a recession. Gen Z is facing similar economic instability. The promise that education and hard work lead to success has been broken for millions of people. Dead-end jobs, student debt, living with roommates well into your 20s, that's reality for a huge portion of viewers. And what do you do when you're stuck in a dead-end job with no clear path forward? You distract yourself. Video games, romance, drama, anything to avoid sitting with the uncomfortable reality that you're going nowhere. Mordecai using romance as a distraction from his lack of purpose hits home because so many people do the same thing. It's easier to obsess over whether your crush likes you back than to confront the fact that you're 25 with no career prospects and no idea what you're doing with your life. The communication failures in Mordecai's relationships also reflect modern dating anxieties. He keeps Margaret's romantic ringtone while dating CJ. He gets in situations that look compromising and then can't explain himself properly. This is texting culture. This is the age of overthinking every message. This is what did they mean by that? This is keeping your ex's number in your phone and telling yourself it doesn't mean anything. This is the anxiety of trying to communicate feelings when you've been taught that being direct is needy or desperate. Mordecai fumbles every important conversation because he's terrified of being vulnerable. He'd rather avoid conflict than have an honest discussion. He'd rather run away than admit he's confused. Sound like anyone you know? Sound like anyone you've dated? Sound like you? The what-if mentality that destroys Mordecai's relationship with CJ is pure grass is greener syndrome. He has something good, but he can't stop wondering if Margaret would have been better. He keeps one foot in the past because he's terrified of fully committing to the present. He hedges his bets. Dating apps have made this worse, but the anxiety existed before them. The fear that you're settling, the fear that your soulmate is out there, and if you commit to the wrong person, you'll miss them. The inability to be fully present in a relationship because you're always wondering if there's something better. CJ asks the question that haunts everyone who's been on the receiving end of this. Why don't you guys just get it right the first time? Why do people keep coming back trying to restart something they already messed up? Why can't they just commit when they have something good? Why is everyone so scared of choosing? And Mordecai has no answer. Because there is no good answer. The grass is greener mentality is based on fear and insecurity, not logic. The fan investment in this love triangle reveals something important about how we engage with media. People genuinely got angry about a cartoon bird's love life. They formed teams. They argued for years. They felt betrayed by the ending. Why? Because we project our own desires onto fictional relationships. Team Margaret people wanted the first love to work out. They wanted persistence to be rewarded. They wanted the fantasy of the perfect girl eventually recognizing the protagonist's worth. Team CJ people wanted growth to be rewarded. They wanted the second relationship, the one built on actual compatibility and friendship, to succeed. They wanted proof that you can mess up with one person and still find happiness with someone else if you learn from your mistakes. Team Steph people, and there aren't many of them, wanted the realistic ending where you grow up and meet someone new when you're actually ready for them. These are expressions of what we believe about love and relationships and growth. The anger about Mordecai ending up with Steph is anger that the show didn't validate whichever belief system the viewer holds. Reddit threads about regular shows ending reveal this perfectly. Some people call it realistic and mature. Others call it a cop-out and betrayal. Some people understand why CJ cut everyone off. Others think she was too harsh. Some people defend Mordecai's mistakes as relatable. Others think he was irredeemable. There's no consensus because there's no consensus in real life about how relationships should work, what people deserve, or when mistakes are forgivable. The discourse around Mordecai is really discourse about ourselves. When someone passionately argues that Mordecai should have ended up with Margaret, they're often arguing that persistence and genuine feeling should matter more than timing or compatibility. When someone argues he should have ended up with CJ, they're arguing that putting in the work to build something real should be rewarded, even if you messed up before. When someone argues the Steph ending was perfect, they're arguing that growth requires leaving the past behind, and that sometimes the right person is someone you haven't met yet. All of these positions are valid. All of them reflect real experiences people have had with love and heartbreak and growth. That's why the debate continues. Mordecai matters because he represents a generation's romantic dysfunction in cartoon form. The simp behavior, the quarter-life crisis, the dead-end job, the communication failures, the what-if mentality, the inability to choose, the pattern of self-sabotage, the using romance as distraction from deeper problems. He's a cartoon bird, but he's also painfully, uncomfortably human. And the show had the courage to let him fail in ways that felt genuinely painful, to show him hurting people, to show him being hurt, to show him losing people permanently, to show that growth is hard and messy and sometimes you don't get the ending you think you deserve. That's why people are still talking about Mordecai years later, because his story asks uncomfortable questions about what we believe about love, and whether we've ever been the Mordecai in someone else's story, whether we've ever simped too hard, whether we've ever used someone as a fantasy, whether we've ever destroyed something good because we couldn't let go of something that was already gone. Most people don't want to think about that. It's easier to be mad at the writers for ruining the show. It's easier to argue about which girl was better. It's easier to call the ending a cop-out than to sit with why it bothers you so much. But the discomfort is the point. Regular Show told a story about romantic failure that felt real in a medium that usually deals in fantasies. And that realness is why people can't let it go. Understanding why we care helps us understand what the show was really trying to say. Section 13. What Regular Show actually taught us about love. Most cartoons teach you that love conquers all. That if you're persistent enough, brave enough, romantic enough, you'll get the girl. That true love is destiny and soulmates exist and everything works out if you just believe hard enough. Regular Show said, that's all lies. Instead, it told a different story, a harder story. A story about how love doesn't fix you, and chasing it while you're broken just breaks other people. A story about how sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself and everyone around you is to stop looking for love entirely and figure out who you are first. The lesson starts early, in the episode, Stake Me Amadeus. Mordecai plans the perfect date. He saves up Amadeus dollars for months. He practices his speech in the mirror. He's ready to officially ask Margaret to be his girlfriend. Everything is set up for the big romantic moment. And then Margaret shows him a letter. She got into her dream school. She starts crying. She tells him she really likes him, that what they have is special, but she may never get this opportunity again. She can't be his girlfriend. She runs out of the restaurant crying. Mordecai drops to his knees, heartbroken and devastated. Even the robot bear from the Capicola gang feels bad for him. That's how painful the moment is. But here's what matters. Margaret made the right choice. She chose her education over a relationship with a guy she'd been dating for a few weeks. She chose her future over romance. She chose herself. And the show presents this as tragic, but correct. There's no moment where Margaret realizes she made a mistake. There's no scene where she regrets choosing college. She did what was best for her, and Mordecai had to accept it. That's lesson 1. Other people have their own lives and dreams and goals that don't revolve around you. Love doesn't mean someone will sacrifice their future for you. Sometimes people choose themselves, and that's okay. After Margaret leaves, Mordecai falls into depression. He listens to sad music. He mopes on the roof. He struggles to function. And then, eventually, he moves on. He meets CJ. He builds something new. For a while, it works. In the episode Real Date, CJ and Mordecai go on an actual romantic date. Mordecai gives her a charm bracelet with charms representing every activity they did the first time they met. It's thoughtful. It's based on their real, shared history together. He literally takes a bullet for her when the CEO of Couple Corral tries to kill her with a bazooka. This is what a relationship built on actual compatibility looks like. They share interests, they have chemistry, they're friends first. It should work. But Mordecai destroys it by refusing to let go of Margaret. The Christmas kiss, the romantic ringtone, the helicopter incident, the wedding speech. Over and over, he proves he's still trapped in the past, even while trying to build a future with CJ. And CJ, recognizing this pattern, walks away. She asks the question that defines the whole arc. Why don't you guys just get it right the first time? That's lesson 2. You can meet the right person at the wrong time and still lose them. Compatibility isn't enough if you're not emotionally ready. You can have chemistry and shared interests and genuine love, and it still won't work if you haven't dealt with your own issues. After CJ dumps him at the wedding, Mordecai disappears. In the episode Dumptown, USA, Rigby discovers Mordecai has been living at Dumptown, a magical refuge for recently dumped guys where they can wallow in their breakups and embrace newfound singlehood. When Rigby finds him, Mordecai has shoulder-length hair, a beard, and is wearing a bathrobe. He's eating cereal straight out of the box with milk poured in. He's living in a trash-filled beach house with other depressed guys who haven't left in years. Some have been there since the 1990s. They've lost all concept of time. Mordecai thinks he's only been there a couple of days. It's been 2 weeks. He's disappearing into his depression, using the beach house as an escape from reality. And he'd stay there forever if Rigby didn't pull him out. But here's what matters. Rigby doesn't tell him to go chase CJ or Margaret. He doesn't tell him to fix the relationship. He tells him something else entirely. Take a break from dating, man. Forget about the chicks and just focus on what's best for Mordecai. That's lesson 3. Sometimes the answer isn't finding the right person. Sometimes the answer is stopping the search entirely. Taking time to be alone. Figuring out who you are without someone else to define you. Mordecai smiles and agrees. He goes back to work. He showers. He burns the bathrobe. And then, for the first time in the series, he actually takes the advice. He stops chasing romance. He focuses on himself. The 25-year time jump shows us what that looks like. Mordecai left the park. He pursued art, the thing he'd given up on after one bad experience in college. He faced his fear of failure. He built a career. He became successful enough to own his own art studio. Only then, after years of growth and work and becoming a complete person, did he meet Steph at an art gallery. Through their shared passion, as equals. That's lesson 4. You meet the right person when you've become the right version of yourself. Not when you're desperate and broken. Not when you're using romance as a distraction. When you're actually whole and have something to offer besides neediness. CJ's story reinforces this. According to the creators, she became a professional dodgeball player. She cut ties with everyone from that period of her life. She built something entirely new for herself, far away from the people who reminded her of pain. She didn't wait around for Mordecai to get his act together. She didn't give him a third chance. She recognized a toxic situation and removed herself from it completely. And she's happy, according to the creators. Happy without Mordecai. Happy without that whole friend group. Happy because she chose herself. That's lesson 5. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away completely. Cut ties. Start fresh. You don't owe anyone your continued presence in their life, especially if being around them hurts you. Margaret's arc tells the same story from a different angle. She chose college, she pursued journalism, she built her career. And when she came back and things got messy with the Christmas kiss, when it became clear that Mordecai couldn't commit, she moved on. She didn't fight for him, she didn't wait, she let him go. 25 years later, she never speaks to him again. She's happy without him. She built her own life. The relationship that once seemed so important, that dominated seasons of the show, becomes just a memory, a thing that happened once, a chapter that closed. That's lesson 6. People grow apart. Relationships that feel earth-shatteringly important at 23 become distant memories by 50. And that's okay. That's life. Not every connection is meant to last forever. The show uses its absurdist comedy to make these realistic points hit harder. Mordecai and Margaret's first kiss happens while bullets are flying at a fancy restaurant during a shootout with a robot bear. The proposal happens during literal chaos, and Margaret still chooses college over him. The comedy makes the pain land softer, while the truth lands harder. Yes, there's a robot bear with a rocket launcher, but underneath that is a real story about a young woman choosing her education over a relationship. About a young man learning that persistence doesn't equal love. About how sometimes the universe throws everything at you, and the answer is still no. When Mordecai goes to Dumptown and Rigby tells him to take a break from dating, it happens in a magical beach refuge where depressed guys play sad saxophone. But underneath the magic is a real conversation about depression, about using relationships as escapism, about needing to fix yourself before you can be with anyone else. The show could have ended with Mordecai winning back Margaret or CJ through some grand gesture. It could have rewarded his persistence. It could have said that true love conquers all, even your own dysfunction. Instead, it said, "You messed up. You hurt people. Those bridges are burned. Move on. Become better. Build something new." That's the most important lesson of all. Your past mistakes don't define you, but they do have consequences. You can't undo the damage you've done. You can't get back what you lost. But you can learn from it. You can grow. You can become someone different, someone better. And if you do that work, the hard, painful, lonely work of actually changing, then maybe, years from now, when you're finally ready, you'll meet someone new. Someone who gets you as the person you've become, without all the baggage of who you used to be. Regular Show used a cartoon bird, a talking raccoon, and magical realism to tell one of the most realistic stories about love and growth that TV has ever told. It said that sometimes you're the problem. Sometimes you lose people forever. Sometimes the best thing to do is stop chasing and start building. That's not the fairy tale, but it might be the truth. Which finally brings us back to our original question. Section 14. So did Mordecai end up with the right person? After everything we've examined, the failures, the heartbreak, the growth, the controversy, we can finally answer the question that started this whole thing. Did Mordecai end up with the right person? Yes, but not for the reasons most people think. Steph wasn't the right person because she was perfect. We barely know anything about her. She has 0 speaking lines in the show. The 25 years later comic reveals she gets jealous when she meets Margaret for the first time, showing she has insecurities like anyone else. Steph was the right person because of who Mordecai was when he met her. Let's break this down through the 4 pillars we established at the beginning. Margaret represented an immature fantasy that could never sustain reality. For 4 seasons, Mordecai chased her. He changed his music taste to match hers. He worked overtime to afford concert tickets. He put her on a pedestal so high she stopped being a person and became an idea. In the episode Stake Me Amadeus, when Mordecai finally asks her to be his girlfriend during a literal shootout, Margaret shows him a letter. She got into her dream school. She chooses education over him. She runs out crying, and Mordecai drops to his knees, devastated. Margaret always had her own life, her own goals, her own agency. She was never the fantasy Mordecai built in his head. Mordecai meeting Steph 25 years later, after he's pursued his own passion for art, represents him finally understanding that other people are complete humans with their own paths. Steph chose him because they connected as equals. 2 artists who respect each other's work. 2 people who met through mutual passion rather than proximity and desperation. CJ was the right person at the wrong time with someone incapable of commitment. They had genuine chemistry. They shared interests. In the episode Real Date, Mordecai gives her a thoughtful charm bracelet and literally takes a bullet to save her. They had something real, and Mordecai destroyed it. The Christmas kiss, the romantic ringtone, the helicopter incident, the wedding speech where he hijacked his best friend's vows to announce he didn't know if CJ was his soulmate. CJ's final question, "You don't know who your soulmate is?" reveals why they couldn't work. Mordecai couldn't choose her fully, couldn't commit completely, couldn't close the door on the past while trying to build a future. According to the creators, CJ no longer speaks to Mordecai or anyone from that friend group. She became a professional dodgeball player and moved on completely. She's happy without him. That's the consequence. That's the bridge burned permanently. Steph represents meeting someone when you're finally capable of commitment. Mordecai at 23 couldn't commit to CJ. Mordecai at 48 married Steph and had 3 kids with her. That's what decades of growth look like. Mordecai's character arc required total destruction and rebuilding. In the episode Dumptown USA, Rigby finds Mordecai living in a beach house full of depressed, recently dumped guys. Mordecai has long hair, a beard, and is eating cereal straight out of the box. He's been there 2 weeks but thinks it's only been a couple of days. When Rigby pulls him out, he gives him the advice that changes everything. Take a break from dating, man. Forget about the chicks and just focus on what's best for Mordecai. This is the turning point. Mordecai stops using romance as a distraction from his real problems. The art school dropout status, the dead-end job making $100 a month, the lack of purpose and direction. The 25-year time jump shows us the result. Mordecai left the park. He pursued art. He faced his fear of failure from the episode Bad Portrait, where we learn he quit art school because one person cried at his drawing. He rebuilt himself from the ground up. Only after that rebuilding did he meet Steph. The creators didn't show us that work because showing it would undercut the point. Mordecai's romantic, happy ending wasn't the climax of his character arc. It was a side effect of completing it. The Steph ending honors the show's commitment to realistic consequences over fan service. J.G. Quintel said it plainly. "I knew that there were 2 camps, people who liked Margaret and people who liked CJ. And with the way we played that story out, it feels like he messed it up for both of them. There was no way he could get either of them back. The show could have given fans what they wanted. Mordecai gets Margaret, and Team Margaret celebrates. Mordecai gets CJ, and Team CJ celebrates. Either choice would have satisfied half the fan base, but both choices would have betrayed the story. Mordecai didn't deserve Margaret or CJ. He hurt both of them. He was wishy-washy, as Matt Price said. He couldn't commit. He kept all his options open. The creators said they're sure Margaret and CJ are happy without Mordecai. These women didn't need Mordecai to complete their stories. They were always whole on their own. They moved on and found happiness elsewhere. Mordecai marrying a stranger honors that reality. Margaret and CJ got their own happy endings that have nothing to do with him. Mordecai had to earn his happy ending through decades of growth. Matt Price explained, "We felt like the Margaret/CJ story was complete, and they were both on their own path already. We also felt like Mordecai had moved on in his life. He finally left the park to pursue art, and we thought it'd be cool if he met someone while doing that." Mordecai moved on in his life. He didn't move on to a different person. He moved on to a different version of himself, and that version met someone new. The final montage shows them at the 25-year park reunion. They have 3 kids. Steph is chatting with Eileen. Mordecai is reconnecting with Rigby. They look comfortable. They look happy. They look like a family that works. The show doesn't ask us to evaluate whether Steph is perfect for Mordecai. It asks us to recognize that Mordecai finally became the kind of person who could have a healthy relationship at all. 23-year-old Mordecai couldn't have made it work with Steph either. He would have sabotaged it the same way he sabotaged Margaret and CJ. 48-year-old Mordecai, who left the park and pursued art and built a career and did the work of becoming whole, could make it work, could be present, could commit, could build something real. That's why Steph is the right person. Mordecai finally became the right person first. Is the ending satisfying? That depends on what you wanted from the show. If you wanted the fairy tale where persistence pays off, you're disappointed. If you wanted Mordecai to learn from mistakes and keep CJ, you're disappointed. If you wanted closure and details about Steph, you're disappointed. But if you wanted a story about how you can't build healthy relationships when you're broken inside, about how growth requires leaving things behind, about how sometimes you mess up so badly that bridges burn forever and you have to build something entirely new, the ending is perfect. Steph represents everything Mordecai learned. She's a real person with her own art career. She's someone he met while pursuing his actual passion. She's someone who chose him as an equal after he'd become someone worth choosing. Mordecai ended up with the right person because the right person for broken 23-year-old Mordecai didn't exist. The right person for grown 48-year-old Mordecai was someone he hadn't met yet, someone who matched who he became after losing everyone from his past. It's the ending the story earned, whether fans wanted it or not. And that leaves us with one final consideration. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, go ahead and subscribe. It's completely free and helps us keep making more content you'll love.